Rumors are again out there that Pope Francis, as I said in my previous video, he's the Pope Regent or the Bishop Administrator of the Diocese of Rome, because the reigning Pontiff, Benedict, passed away. So Pope Regent running things until the true successor of Benedict is chosen, has got it in his mind to utterly and completely destroy the apostolic liturgies of the Catholic Church, starting, of course, with the Roman Rite. And he started doing this as soon as Benedict was really getting old and almost dying, and he issued his decree, or whatever you want to call it, Traditionis Custodis, which was basically his attempt to completely ban and abolish the traditional Roman Rite, and calling the fabricated 1969 production, fabrication, as Cardinal Ratzinger / Benedict XVI called it, as the unique form of the Roman Rite, when it was manufactured as in a manufacturing process, as Benedict again called it, in 1969. And the 2,000-year-old received, not invented and manufactured and concocted liturgy of the Church was not the Roman Rite. It is no longer. And the reason was, it's a different ecclesiology, it's a different this and a different that. Reason being, it teaches the Catholic faith pure and unadulterated, and that's not acceptable in those running the Church today. And the point of this video is that there was an interview, as you can see on the screen here, by, and I'm surprised he actually gave this interview, the Professor Andrea Grillo. And I mentioned him previously. If you look at my previous videos regarding no Pope has the power to abolish the Latin Mass or the traditional rite, and the reason they hate the traditional Latin Mass or the traditional Roman Rite is because they hate the faith. These are a couple of videos I have, and I'm certain I quoted Grillo there several times, because the decree of Traditionis Custodis, which was with Jorge Bergoglio, the Argentine heretic, wanted to do. He is the author. He is the brains behind the puppet of Jorge. He's the liturgical brains, basically, of the destruction of the Roman Rite, giving him the reasons, the direction to destroy the Roman Rite, give him the logical reasons. And he mentioned, it's against the, it's contrary to the current ecclesiology of the Catholic Church, therefore it has to be banished. Well, then the current ecclesiology, the post-conciliar ecclesiology, is in contradiction to the perennial ecclesiology of the Church. Therefore, who do you choose? The traditional apostolic 2,000-year-old ecclesiology, or the novel, invented, fabricated ecclesiology of post-1969? Well, heretics would choose the new, the novel, the innovative, the innovation instead of the tradition, the apostolic, the Catholic. So anyways, he did an interview with Missa in Latino, which is an Italian website for the traditional Roman Rite, the real Roman Rite. And it's in Italian, of course, but there's by Diane Montagna, who is an excellent Catholic reporter. She translated that article. So it was republished on, first of all, it is published on Missa in Latino in the English translation by Diane Montagna, and Rorate Celi Blogspot brought it to the attention of everybody else as well, and they republished it on their site. So I'm going to go through the Missa in Latino version, which is the same because it's both by Diane Montagna, but I honestly have not read the article. So I'm going to go on the fly of my reaction, my understanding, my refutation, and I'm pretty sure of the garbage this man who's giving us the middle finger, as you can see here, is spewing. So, and I'm just gonna, and I'm just going to read the post by Diane Montagna, and then we're going to get going. So she says, just in, that's June 18th, 2024, because the rumor mill is going that they're going to find the final solution to deal with those who adhere to the traditional Roman liturgy. The church, the just in from Diane Montagna, June 18th, 2024, says, the church isn't a high society club, I guess it's quoting Grillo there, or a sect that experiences infidelity as salvation. So he's calling those who adhere to the traditional Roman Rite as infidels, and they consider themselves to be saved as salvation. So Misa in Latino interviews well-known Italian liturgist, destroyer of the liturgy, Professor Andrea Grillo, on the future of the traditional Latin Mass, the Chartres pilgrimage, which had the biggest, which if you don't know, it's the traditional Catholic pilgrimage in France from Chartres Cathedral to Paris to Notre Dame. Notre Dame before it was burned down. From Paris to Chartres, the Society of St. Pius X does the opposite direction. It had like 20,000 young people going, 20,000 fervent Catholics from around the world, mostly young, who pray and confess and receive Holy Communion and adhere to the Catholic faith. Oh, these are evil people. Because, as I said before, they hate the traditional Roman Rite. Why? Because it passes on the traditional faith. And they hate the faith once for all delivered to the saints. That's why they seek its destruction. And calling those who adhere to it, to the received and approved rites of the Church, as the Council of Trent says, as schismatic, when they are the ones who are in schism against the Church and against the truth and against the apostles. So he deals with the future of the traditional Roman Rite, Chartres pilgrimage, and more English translation here. So we're going to go into the English translation in a second. But again, why am I talking about this? Because I'm going to give you a quote from a dogmatic canon of the Council of Trent regarding the traditional liturgy, and then we're going to go into the article itself, which I have not read. So I hope and I pray that God brings into my head the correct Christian Catholic response to the liturgist giving us the middle finger, representing the Pope Regent, who's giving us the middle finger, who's appointing cardinals to the Congregation for the Discipline of the Sacraments, who are giving us the middle finger, giving the Church the middle finger, giving Christ the middle finger. So anyways, here's the decree. And I did the Google Latin English, but I'm going to show you actually. Well, let me show you here. But well, it's getting all confusing now. But anyways, before we get, if you truly wanted to see what the popes up to Pope John the 23rd thought about the liturgy, about the received and approved liturgies of the Catholic Church, East and West, Roman and not Roman, you need to get or find this book if possible. I found it actually online as a PDF and I downloaded it. I can't even remember where, but I did search for it and I found it, because published version you can't find. And it is the teachings of the popes, and it was collected by the monks of Solesme, and it is starting with which popes, I think, papal document from some 1740, from 1740 to 1964 or 65 or something like that, or 1962, whatever. It is up to John the 23rd. Okay, so from Pope Benedict XIV in 1740, it accumulates sections of what did the, here's the book, papal teachings on the liturgy. So for hundreds of years, and they simply reiterated, and see all my little marks there, my little tabs. Oh, I'm going the wrong way here. My little tabs here. But I read it years ago, and it is invaluable to actually get the mind of what did the popes constantly teach? What did they believe? What does the Catholic Church believe? Because they were not passing on their understanding, their belief, but what is the faith? And in short, we preserve what we have received. We do not innovate. If something went awry, when novelty has crept into the liturgies of whether East or West, they need to be corrected and restored to their pre-deform, the pre-novelty. That's why Pius V, when he reissued the Roman Missal, simply said any liturgical rite, so from all the different churches and the religious orders who had their own liturgical books. So if they have books from 200 years before, at least 200 years old and before, they're fine. They should be kept. But beyond, so he wanted to eradicate novelty, which was starting to creep into the liturgy. So any novelties which crept into the liturgies for, say, the last 150 years before his issue, these novelties had to be removed, and these books were not to be used. You can use the previous versions, because to keep the faith pure. So always, no novelty, no introduction of novelty. Even Vatican II, in its decree to the Oriental churches, I can't remember the Eastern churches, it tells them, if novelties have crept in, return to your apostolic rites. If Latinizations have crept in, return to your apostolic liturgies. Restore what has been lost. Adhere to your ancient rites, your venerable rites, which are a treasure, which goes exactly the same for the Roman Rite. It wouldn't be the right for the Eastern church liturgies, but not the same for the ancient Roman liturgy? Of course not. So the popes have always, no novelty, no innovation, preserve what you've received, restore what has been lost. If you get the book, and you will see. So you will see that these people are contrary to all the teaching of the church. And as a further source, we can read the fathers, the church. It is any old liturgical book, anything. A really good set of books to get is here, for you to see here. The canons and decrees of the Ecumenical Council. So it starts from Nicaea, from the First Ecumenical Council, till up to and including Vatican II. So again, if you read these books, you will again see that it is required. No novelty. Must adhere to the canons, to the received traditions of the church, ecclesiastical and apostolic. If you deviate from ecclesiastical traditions, you have to be deposed or excommunicated, and so forth. No novelty, no innovation, must adhere to tradition, received, apostolic, liturgical, everything. But these people want us to do the exact opposite of the entire history of the church. And I'm going to go a couple of quotes at the end of the video of some of the canons, not very few. I didn't really go through the whole thing again. I just recalled there were certain things which I recalled. So I'm going to mention. But I'm going to start off with, actually, maybe I should find it here. In volume 2, actually, it's a Council of Trent, which again deals with changes in the liturgy. So it is in session 7 of March. I don't know if it's focused or not, but anyway, session 7 on the decree on the sacraments. So I'm not going to go, and it talks about the external rites of the church, and it is, and it dealt with that in Canon 13 of Session 7 of the Council of Trent. So I provided here kind of and I compared the Google Translate to the one provided by the book. It's pretty much identical, with the exception in the book they did not translate contemn, meaning to despise. They did not translate that word in the book, but it is translated on the Google. So the canon itself reads as follows: if anyone, not except the Pope, except an ecumenical council, except a conference of Catholic bishops, except the patriarch. No, if anyone. And it actually matches what previous councils, which I'm going to go quickly through at the end of the video, just very few points. If anyone shall say, just say, not do, that the accepted and approved, meaning receptos, received, actually the received. We do not invent our rites and ceremonies, we receive them. Anyone shall say that the received and approved rites of the Catholic Church, which are customarily, which are traditionally, here it says, which are customary, which are the traditionally used in the administration of the solemn sacraments or the solemn administration of the sacraments, may either, if just saying it, may either be despised, which is here contempt, to be despised, or omitted without sin by the ministers at will, because they wanted to, or changed into new ones, what happened after Vatican II, into new ones by any pastor of the churches, or any pastor whatever. Actually, it says here in the book, it says any pastor whatever, and the actual translation, it is here quecumque, so which is by whomsoever, by any pastor whomsoever, any and all pastors, so nobody. So even just to say that they received and approved rites used in the administration of the sacraments of the Catholic Church may either be despised. These are old, which is Grillo, Francis, and his cohorts there, his junta. They despise the received and approved rites of the Catholic Church. Customarily means traditionally used in the administration of the sacraments. May either be despised, omitted without sin by the minister at will, or changed into new ones by any pastor whatsoever, whomsoever. Quecumque. And here translation says here, any pastor, whatever. Doesn't matter. Nobody, by any pastor of the church, let him be anathema. Let him be anathema. So nobody can even just say it, let alone do it, which is exactly what Paul VI did in 1969. He approved the total suppression of the traditional liturgy. Actually, he never really abrogated the books or anything. Even Cardinal Ratzinger and Benedict XVI said that, which I'm going to get to in a future video. But even changing it, and what did he do? He replaced the ancient liturgy with a new rite. And at the end of the video, I'm going to just give you a little preview here. The two speeches of Paul VI, where he explicitly talks that the new Mass, that his liturgy is a new rite. It's a different rite, and it's a novelty. It's an innovation. So that is exactly what Paul VI did. So again, I'm going to read this canon from the Council of Trent, which echoes the ancient canons of the previous ancient councils. If anyone, and this is a dogmatic canon, it is a dogma of faith. Whomsoever, which includes the Pope, and a pastor is a Pope. A Pope is the pastor. If anyone shall say that they accepted, that they received receptos et approbatos, that they received and approved rites of the Catholic Church, used in the administration of the solemn sacraments, may either be despised, contemned, which is exactly what they do, they despise them, or omitted without sin by any pastor at will, or changed into new ones by any pastor whatever, any pastor whomsoever, let him be anathema. That is the Council of Trent. And this, you think, it is a dogmatic decree. It is from the actual dogmatic council. Vatican II was a pastoral. Cardinal Ratzinger, Benedict XVI, in 1988, in his speech to the Chilean bishops, which I've quoted previously, and you can look it up yourself on Google, tells them that Vatican, and he was a Paridi, he was one of the experts at the council, one of the main men at the council, Ratzinger, Joseph Ratzinger, later Benedict XVI. He tells the Chilean bishops, the Vatican II is like almost the least of all councils. He tells them specifically that it did not dogmatize anything, did not define anything. He tells them that the council chose to restrict itself to being merely a pastoral council. These are the words of Cardinal Ratzinger, head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith under Pope John Paul II in 1988. So, and as I said, it is a dogma of faith. It is a part of the Catholic faith to accept and receive the received rights, to hold on to them, not to abandon them, and of course, certainly not to change them and replace them with new ones. And at the end of the video, again, I'm going to show you that, and I've mentioned it in previous videos, that various theologians say that a pope would fall into schism, would become a schismatic if he himself did not want to celebrate the ancient liturgies or replace them with new ones, or of course he tries to impose new ones on the church. He would fall into schism. He would fall from the papacy, basically. So at the end of the Council of Trent, there was the creed, the profession of faith of the Council of Trent. And that exact same profession was repeated on January 6, 1870 at the First Vatican Council. It is the profession of faith. So the Catholic Church has 4 professions of faith. The Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Constantinople Creed, the Nicene Creed, the Creed of St. Athanasius, and the Creed of the Council of Trent. So 4 different creeds. So the Catholic Church has these 4 creeds. These are professions of faith. You cannot deny an article of the faith and still be a Christian. You cannot deny an article of the creed and still be a Catholic. You would be a heretic. So what does this profession of faith say? So this one, Pius IX himself is professing it. I, Pius, Bishop of the Catholic Church, with firm faith believe and profess. Look at these words. Each and every article contained in the what? Profession of faith, which the Holy Roman Church uses, and that profession of faith is the profession of faith of the Council of Trent, repeated at Vatican I. Namely, I believe in one God, the Father, and so forth. And number 2, that's number 1. Number 2, apostolic and ecclesiastical traditions, even the minor t there, and all other observances and constitutions of that same church, I most firmly accept and embrace. So this is part of the faith, is to accept and embrace the received apostolic and ecclesiastical traditions and observances and constitutions of the church. So this is part of, and then of course number 3, I accept sacred scripture, which shows you the level of, this is an article of the faith of the Catholic Church. And number 5, which echoes the Council of Trent, because that comes from the profession of the Council of Trent, profession of faith. Number 5, I likewise, and that's the Pope speaking. And of course, it goes for all the bishops of the world, all Catholics of the world, all Christians of the world. I likewise receive, I receive and accept. So we receive the rites of the church. We do not invent them. We do not create them. We do not modify them out of existence. I likewise receive, meaning I do not have power to invent new ones. I do not have power to create a new rite and abolish and forbid the received and accepted rite. No, you can't. It is contrary to the faith. You become at least a schismatic, if not a heretic. Okay. Number 5, I likewise receive and accept the rites of the Catholic Church which have been received and approved. So these rites have been received. They were not created by committee and some Protestant theologians helping Annibale Bonini create the new rites of the liturgy, of all, not just the Mass, of all 7 sacraments. Brand new rites, brand new prayers, slashing and throwing the garbage ancient rites and prayers in the solemn administration of all the aforesaid sacraments, meaning all the sacraments, baptism, confirmation, anointing of the saints, Mass, so the ones, the 7 sacraments mentioned up here. And this is, as I said, just echoed the Council of Trent, which is, if anyone shall say that the received and approved rites of the Catholic Church, which are customary, traditionally, customarily, from custom, be used in the administration of the solemn sacraments, may either be despised or omitted without sin by the minister at will, or changed into new ones by any pastor whomsoever, any pastor of the church, let him be anathema. And Pius IX, which is the repeating of the profession of faith of Vatican I. Now this is the profession the profession of faith of the Council of Trent, is repeated as the profession of faith of the First Vatican Council. Pius, the Pope himself, the supreme pastor, the successor of Peter, the highest authority, who has the plenitude potestas, the plenitude of power, he accepts the ecclesiastical and apostolic traditions and observances and constitution of the church. He embraces them, and likewise receive and accepts the rites of the Catholic Church which have been received and approved, not invented, in the solemn administration of all the aforesaid sacraments. So he is repeating, because otherwise he would be anathematized according to the Council of Trent. And then at the end of the creed it says, this true Catholic faith, outside of which none can be saved. This is the faith. This is the faith. But of course, for people like Grillo, who's giving us the middle finger, and Pope Francis and his cohorts and the Vatican dicasteries are trying to do the exact opposite of that. And they are going to deserve the wrath of God, which will descend upon them, definitely. And before we get into and then now we're going to go into the article itself, but as an aside at the beginning, okay, let's talk about the possibility. What happens? What happens if Pope Francis bans the ancient liturgy from whether just diocesan, whether he says tries to suppress traditional orders, whether he says if you celebrate that you can't allow children to go to it, or whatever the reason. What is the value? What is the What is our moral obligation to it? My moral obligation is not to, like I think 1 Peter 5 says, maybe we don't deserve the traditional Mass. Oh, let's just suffer. No. The simple answer is your command is illegal. You do not have power to decree any such thing. On the contrary, you ought to abolish the novelty of the new Roman liturgy of Paul VI and re-establish the ancient rite after the received and approved rites used in the administration of the sacraments of the Catholic Church, of the Roman Church. This is your duty. So any so-called decree or command or whatever of Pope Francis or any of his cohorts is null and void by itself. And in fact, they incur the anathema of Trent, the anathema of the creed of the profession of faith of Trent and Vatican I. They receive the anathema and even excommunication and deposition decreed in the ancient councils, which I will finish the video with. So what happens if he says, oh, you can't have the Latin Mass? Okay, I'll just totally ignore it. Totally ignore it. You continue to go to the traditional liturgy. If they ban your diocesan, and if you have cowardly bishops who succumb to this and suppress the traditional liturgy of the Mass in their churches, in the diocesan churches, find hopefully still the traditional orders are still there, which are in full communion with Rome. And if they succumb to the decree and start celebrating the new liturgy, go find, say, the Society of St. Pius X. I would not have hesitation at that stage I do not go to the Society of St. Pius X, but I would, because no pope has the authority to do whatever they're planning to do, whatever they already tried to do. And just recently, the traditional liturgy in the Melbourne Cathedral in Australia was banished, was forbidden after decades of being there. And what they did was they asked the Vatican, are we allowed to have, the Bishop of Melbourne had to ask the Vatican if he's allowed to have the ancient liturgy in his own cathedral. And the Vatican said, no, you gotta get rid of it. So he's like a lapdog, like a vicar of the Pope, instead of being a vicar of Christ, as Vatican II clearly states that the bishops are not vicars of the Pope. They are not vicars of the Pope. They're helpers, but they're not vicars of the Pope. But every bishop is living as if he is an employee of the Pope, a vicar of the Roman Pontiff. They are not. They are heads of their own churches. And contrary to the words of the Traditionis Custodis, which claims to restore to the bishops the right over the liturgy in their own diocese, it is exactly the opposite. It is Rome imposing upon the bishops, forbidding them to allow the liturgy which they deem, which is Catholic. It is 2,000 years old. It is not a novel liturgy invented by committee in the 1960s. Okay, so let's get my hair. So this is from Rorati's at the beginning, but we're going to go into the Missa in Latino. So they say they want to ban the traditional. Look, all these evil infidels who think they have the faith. Well, yes, they do, compared to you, Grillo and Jorge and the evil people in the Vatican. Yeah, they do, of course. So it just says, in the introduction to the article by Rorati, it just says, Grillo is the lay voice, the lay brains behind the operation of destroying the liturgy, compared to and then the dicastery has the clerical ideologue too. And they give Francis the reasons. It's a different ecclesiology. It creates schism. It's divisive, blah, blah, blah. So Rorati says this is an astonishing interview. The hatred and disgust for his fellow Catholics expressed in his words, for instance, calling the multitude of young people attending the Charles pilgrimage in France little more than a sect that experiences infidelity as salvation, and not reserved these words are not reserved even for the worst enemies of the church. This is the mercy of Francis. This is the openness and progressivism of Francis's Vatican. It is a Vatican full of total hatred of the Catholic faith. Yeah. Now, as I've said, I have not read the article, so let's hope. Oh, my itchy nose here, my itchy nose. Let's hope I can say the right words. I might lose my temper, but I'm feeling I'm kind of in a stoic, kind of a relaxed mood today for some reason. But you never know. So here's the article. Interview with Andrea Grillo on the traditional liturgy. So I guess they're quoting him. The church isn't a high society club or a sect that experiences infidelity as salvation. So infidelity, to be faithful to the ancient liturgy, is to be infidel. Yes, I am an infidel to novelty. I am an infidel to innovation. I'm an infidel to the heresies. Yes, I'm in schism against falsehood and novelty and innovation. Yes, which makes me faithful to apostolic and liturgical and doctrinal tradition. Now, let's hear. Let's see the introduction. Over the past weekend, during the 3 days on Don Primo Mazzolari, held every year in the Diocese of Cremona, yours truly, Luigi C., the interviewer, met Professor Andrea Grillo, the leader of liturgical progressivism. Grillo is a professor of sacramental theology. Imagine, these are the people teaching the future priests. He teaches sacramental theology and the philosophy of religion in Rome at the Pontifical Athenaeum of St. Anselm. And he's a professor of liturgy in Padua at the Abbey of Santa Giustina. He is a prolific liturgist, a destroyer, a false liturgist, theologian, and author of popular blogs, popular blog Come Se Non. And I quoted him previously in a previous video. Total hatred for true Christianity. From the point of view of liturgical theology, we disagree with Professor Grillo on almost everything. We have always appreciated his brutal frankness. Yes, because he doesn't hide before false words, before soft words. Like in Traditionis Custodis, we're restoring the bishops the right over the liturgy in their own diocese. And then, no, hey bishops, you gotta shut down all your traditional liturgies, even in your own cathedral, bishop, in your own very own church. So the bishop, the cathedral is the church of the bishop himself. So Rome tells the bishop, no, you stop this mass in your own cathedral. What? So they tells them, one side, double-tongued. They are double-tongued in the Vatican, double-tongued with Francis. Oh, we are restoring to you the rights. The evil Benedict took away your rights, allowing the traditional liturgy anywhere that any priest wanted it. Oh, we're giving back the right to you, bishops, to manage the liturgy in your own diocese. But hey, stop it. You can't have the traditional liturgy in your own very own church, your own cathedral, bishop. You have to ban it. And the bishops, like lapdogs, as vicars of the false Pope of Francis, lick his shoes, and say, okay, sure, why not? Who cares about Christ? Who cares about the apostles? Who cares about the liturgy we've received for 1,000 years? I will do it. It's okay. This is pure atheism, as Cardinal Sarah says. From the point of view of liturgical theology, we disagree with Professor Grillo on almost everything, but we have always appreciated his brutal frankness. At least he speaks clearly. Yes, at least he speaks clearly. Now he tells you, I'm your enemy, and that's the way it is. In Traditionis Custodis, a document that appears to have been prepared by officials within the Congregation for the Divine Worship, and now it should be called the Congregation for the Demonic Worship, for the Satanic Worship, for the Pachamama worship, for the worship of the spirits of the ancestors, for the worships of the gods of the heathens, and the discipline of the sacraments, meaning the indiscipline of the sacraments. Every liturgical, disciplinary abuse, perversion of the even existing Novus Ordo liturgies, it's okay. But, I mean, even Traditionis Custodis says, oh, you have to stop priests even celebrating the new rite of Paul VI, if they're celebrating it too much in a conservative manner, imitating much of the pre-conciliar liturgy, which is false because the conciliar liturgy itself, Vatican II, celebrated the ancient Roman Rite. It was post-conciliar liturgy, the false liturgy of Paul VI. So even if once a priest celebrating the new rite in a more reverent way, facing east, maybe wearing a maniple, has to be banned. Even Traditionis Custodis, that's too much discipline, too much rigidity. We recognize the thrust of his thinking, his writing, and his proposals. So all of his, like, he's the brains behind the destruction. So of course, because anyways, I mean, you can just look at Jorge. You can tell he's like, he's got limited mental capacity. He's reminds us of a certain president who, walks like, what's his name? In The Simpsons, the super rich guy. And anyways, the professor, whom we thank very much for his honesty. Yes, let's be honest, and let's be honest again. There can no longer, or there can have never been any, as Scripture says, what is Christ and Belial? What interaction? What communion? What can have Christ between Christ and the devil? Between truth and error? Between orthodoxy and heresy? Between tradition and novelty? It's impossible. So yeah, the fake Roman Rite is the enemy of the true Roman Rite. And we have to call the fake Roman Rite as the fake Roman Rite. It's fake and it's false. Now, if you have zero options, you cannot go to the traditional Roman Rite. You cannot go to any of the ancient Eastern rites. What, you're going to sit at home and not receive the sacraments? No. You search hard, wide, and find a new rite, a Novus Ordo, but at least find a priest who is Orthodox, who tries his best to say it in a reverent manner, and at least Christ is present there. But okay, he has kindly granted us an interview, which we reproduce below. In the view of many in the Roman Curia, for Pope Francis, for Pope Regent. He's not even Pope. He's not like a Pope in a full sense. He's the Regent Pope, because Benedict gave up the governing powers, so a Regent Pope can exercise the governing powers, because Benedict said he was too weak to do the governing powers. But he remained Pope. He was called Pope. He lived as Pope. He died as Pope. He was buried as Pope. His tombstone says Benedictus, Pope and Pontiff PP the 16th, in the tomb of Pope John Paul II. So Francis is a Pope Regent. He's not Pope in the full and complete and whole sense of the word. He's the Bishop Administrator of the Impeded See of Rome. Professor Grillo is on liturgy what Father James Martin Adhere is for on homosexuality. So Professor Grillo is on liturgy what Jimmy Martin is on homosexuality. So now you can get the idea of the power and the influence of this man. We thank Diane Montagna for the English translation of Missa in Latino's important interview, Luigi C. So let's get into the interview. I know it's been a while, but hey, you know me. You know my videos are long. If you want just little headlines, he called the Catholics bad words. Okay, that's the video for the day. Bye-bye. No. We have to demolish their ideas by what the Church has always taught. Okay, let's read it. As I've said, I have not read it. I have no idea exactly what he's going to say. And let's see. Maybe he will, maybe I'll convert to his point of view. You never know. Now, Misa in Latin says, why, as it appears, at least to us, does it seem that at all costs, there is no desire to give a free space in the Catholic Church? The Catholic, unity in diversity, and diversity in unity, unity in diversity, words which they say but they do not mean. Why is there no free space given to traditionalists who are faithful to Rome, meaning they do not deny the validity of Francis's election, which I, of course, do deny because Benedict never resigned the papacy, but Francis was chosen as the Pope Regent, like so many other lay movements, and he could have said heretical lay movements, and that they are only regarded as faithful to be re-educated. Actually, the document Traditionis Custodis says, well, it might not be easy to ban completely all the traditional liturgies in your diocese, so you have to kind of cut them down, banish them from parish churches, and slowly re-educate, convert, bring those misguided traditional Catholics back into the light and illumination of the liturgical renewal of Vatican II. So Professor Grillo responds. Let's see what he says. The first question contains numerous inaccuracies, such as that undermine the very meaning of the question. I will try to illustrate them one by one. All right, Professor Grillo, illustrate them for me, please, because I'm a stupid idiot who doesn't understand. Those you call traditionalists faithful to Rome are actually people who, for various reasons, are at odds with Rome, at odds with novelty, at odds with Francis's heresies and novelties, at odds with the liturgical novelty of the new rite, as Paul VI himself calls his own creation, he called it a nuisance and an annoyance, Paul VI, at odds with Rome, and not in a relationship of fidelity, meaning servility, meaning slavery. No, there's a difference between fidelity and slavery, between respect and acceptance of truth and obedience, true obedience, to false obedience. There's a difference. And where was this fidelity, Grillo? Where was adherence to Rome, Grillo, when Pope Benedict told everyone that the ancient liturgy was never abrogated, that told everybody that it has to be respected, and what has been holy for our forefathers is still holy and beautiful and reverent and rich, and that all priests anywhere in the world, without the permission of their bishops, have the right to celebrate the ancient liturgy, and the faithful have the right to it, and the faithful can ask their priests to celebrate. Where was this fidelity to Rome, Grillo, at that time? Of course, he probably was ranting and raving against it. And same thing with all the modernist heretics, the evil so-called Catholics online or on X. Oh, you have to obey Pope Francis. And these same people were probably condemning Pope Benedict, the exact same crowd. The point of contention does not simply concern a ritual form, but it does, sir, because you yourself said that the ritual form expresses a different dogma, a different ecclesiology than the post-conciliar liturgy. So it is an attack on the faith itself, but a way of understanding relations inside and outside the church. Inside and outside the church. And why do they hate that? Because the traditional liturgy, that outside the church there is no salvation. Again, you have to understand that in terms of logic, because the church provides the sacraments, and baptism, valid baptism, brings one into as a member of the body of Christ. Of course, if it was received outside, so that's a means of salvation. But even if received administered by a heretic outside the church, the bond of communion, or a schismatic. But if somebody grows and understands and adheres to heresy, he falls out. He's outside the church now. And of course, the traditional liturgy is very clear. There's only one church. There's only one fold. There's only one baptism, one Lord, one faith, one truth. Of course, that goes against the false Irenicism, which has taken over after Vatican II, not the true ecumenism promoted at Vatican II, because Vatican II itself says it condemns false Irenicism, which it explains as the watering down of Catholic doctrine, the dumbing down of the Catholic faith, so others won't be offended. So seeking unity by not talking about the full truth of the Catholic faith. But that's exactly the ecumenism which prevailed and prevails. Let's continue. It all begins with the misunderstanding generated in good faith through the completely wrong judgment by the motu proprio Summorum Pontificum of Benedict XVI, which had indeed introduced a ritual parallelism between the Novus Ordo and the Vitus Ordo, meaning the new and the old order. Yeah, it's a Novus Ordo. It's a brand new novelty, yes, that has neither a systematic nor practical foundation. So he actually here criticizes Benedict. But of course, you have to adhere to Francis. But in this case, I totally agree. Benedict XVI was forced. I mean, actually, there's an interview I'm going to do a video on, which is while he was still Cardinal Ratzinger. And all the ideas of Summorum Pontificum about the ordinary form, extraordinary form, and all, were talked about. He, as head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith under John Paul II, he talked about them in the late 80s, 90s, something like that. So he actually executed them in the in 2007, 7 July 2007, when he basically said, yeah, there's the ordinary form, meaning the novel Novus Ordo, the invented liturgy of Paul VI, and the extraordinary. Well, it is extraordinary because it comes to us from the apostle form of the Roman Rite. But and he claims it's a one Roman Rite, but with two forms. No, it's not. So this is, Ratzinger he had to do that as a kind of a practical matter, because as Pope, he couldn't just say, well, that's a novelty. It's he said it as a cardinal. That's a fabricated liturgy, a banal on-the-spot product that gave us stones instead of bread. He said all that, but as Cardinal Ratzinger, in his introduction to the book of Claus Gamber, Reform of the Roman Liturgy in the French edition, and other talks. He couldn't say that because it would create a big, unease and raucous in the church. We don't need that. So he said, you know what? Yes, fine. Let's call them two different forms of the same Roman Rite. The ordinary form, which is the one you guys are used to, and the one which actually comes to us from the apostles. So let's make this false distinction. But in reality, both have the same rights, both are totally free, both are Catholic, and so forth. So he had to do that as a practical governing manner, but not in absolute truth. So in a sense, I do agree with Professor Grillo, because the Vitus Ordo, the old rite, the traditional rite, they received, remember the quotes of Vatican I, quote of the Council of Trent, repeating the Creed of Vatican I and the Council of Trent. We accept as a matter of faith the received and approved rites customarily, traditionally used in the Catholic Church for the administration of the solemn sacraments. And nobody whatsoever may alter them or replace them with new ones. Anathema sit. So this is the faith. So Benedict tried to make this kind of compromise for the peace, simply, But he allowed the flourishing of new foundations of traditional orders, old orders returning back to the rights of their founders, and so forth. He allowed it and let it grow and grow and grow. But of course, came Francis, the hammer came down. Number one on the Franciscan Friars of the Immaculate, and then it continues. The hammers, raining down on. I have the video called, I think, The Mercy of Pope Francis or something, where he just, goes after every faithful bishop, especially bishops who have flourishing traditional liturgies in their diocese. The last one being in southern France now. We have the false rite of Paul VI and the true Roman rite. Yeah, so we adhere to the true and not to the false. Let's continue with Professor Grillo. It is not theologically sound and generates greater division than those that were present previously. Yeah, because previously we were saying, the ancient liturgy is banned, which it wasn't, because even Cardinal Ratzinger under John Paul II said it was never banned or abrogated, and it was legal and possible to be celebrated at any time, even before Summorum Pontificum. But he wants to destroy it. The idea of fidelity to Rome must be challenged. To be faithful to Rome, one must acquire a ritual language, according to what Rome has communally established, meaning imposed. And what is Rome? A city? No, you're talking about a man, the Pope. A ritual language. So basically, you want to be fidelity to Rome, must have one ritual language. So meaning all the rites of the East have to adhere to that ritual language of the Roman Church to be in full communion and have fidelity to Rome. So they have to abandon their ancient liturgies to have that ritual language. And what is this ritual language? I challenge anybody watching to go to, say, 4 or 5 parishes in your own city, and you will find that the ritual language and the way the Mass is celebrated is sometimes quite drastically different. Go to Africa with dancing and drums and stuff, talking about the same ritual language. We'll go to South and Latin America, where they introduce worship of demons, their demon gods and rituals. Even in North America, where they start bringing, the Aboriginal rites of, with feathers, and let's do with the feathers, and I'm going to incense you with my feathers. Are these the same ritual language, Grillo? No, they don't care. They don't care. What they care about is banishing and destroying the ancient liturgies, the solid apostolic rites. One is not faithful if one has one foot in two shoes. One foot in two shoes. Having demonstrated this contradiction, the merit of Traditionis Custodis is that it re-established the one lex orandi, which I quoted him before. What is lex orandi? The law of prayer. So Traditionis Custodis established the one law of prayer, because there's an ancient saying, actually even quoted in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, the Vatican II Catechism, which gives the full quote of it, but the abbreviated one is lex orandi, lex credendi, the law of prayer, the law of belief, the law of faith. So the way you pray forms what you believe. The way you pray forms what you believe. And that's why actually during the Protestant, the English Anglican Reformation, and actually even Martin Luther, he didn't start completely, he started changing the prayers, removing prayers, altering prayers. And people just, peasants and stuff, they don't know what's going on. Okay, this church I've been going to since I was born. Slowly, by changing the prayer, by changing the ritual, you change the faith. And that is the reason why these demon-possessed vessels, from Pope Francis to Grillo and their ilk, have this demonic, and I'm not using that word lightly, this demonic hatred of the traditional, not only the Roman Rite, but all traditional apostolic liturgies. If they had their way, if there was full communion with all the Orthodox and Oriental Orthodox, if these people are still in control, you give it 10, 20 years and they will destroy their apostolic liturgies. Because the lex orandi, the law of prayer of their liturgies, which is apostolic, passes on a lex credendi, a law of faith, an ancient apostolic faith, which these people, the heretics that they are, reject. And that is and I said, actually, I have a video. You should, I keep on saying I have a video. Just browse my channel, please. And it says, I did it, they hate the Latin Mass because they hate the faith. I can't remember if that's the exact title, but it's something to that effect. And that is the reason Pope Francis hates the Latin Mass, because he hates the faith. And that is the reason, the lex orandi, the law of prayer. They do not want the law of prayer of the ancient apostolic, the received and approved rites of the Catholic Church, customarily, traditionally used in the administration of the solemn sacraments, as Vatican I and its creed and the Council of Trent declares. They hate that. They don't want that. That's why they created a new law of prayer to alter the faith. And then what happened after they had the new lex orandi, the new law of prayer? People left the faith. What happened to the Catholic Church? What happened to vocations, churches, monasteries, nunneries, seminaries, the faith of the very people, no longer going to churches? I was just in Europe recently on a very short visit. I went to Prague, and the tour guide was saying, oh, Prague is like so full of churches. Even the old downtown has like, I don't know how many, she told me, 10, 20 churches. Like, it's like a tiny place and has churches everywhere. And she says, basically all these churches are empty. And she said, and one of the people at the tour said, well, what is the religious affiliation of most Czechs? She said, well, she was talking about the Protestants and the Catholics, and Protestants didn't want statues, and anyways, so that question came up, and she said 80% of Czechs are atheists. 80% of Czechs are atheists. And she said all these churches, the churches are empty. I was actually feeling sad. I was like being depressed, seeing all these churches, again, first of all, not well maintained. They got black on the statues, black, even their old downtown. Like, clean up your city, remove all the gunk and dirt off your beautiful statues. But she said, these churches are being just used as concert halls right now for operas and concerts. That's the lex orandi. And that's not just Czech Republic. Throughout Europe, throughout France, throughout England, throughout North America. Churches are being changed into restaurants, into nightclubs, into condos. Thank you, Grillo, for your new lex orandi, which has provided us with a false faith, a weak faith, a no faith, an atheism. Okay, so anyways, I'm going to read just this part. The merit of Traditionis Custodis is that it reestablished the one. There can only be one. Yes, true, not your fake one, lex orandi, enforced in the entire Catholic Church. Is it? Entire Catholic Church? So what, you don't consider the Byzantines Catholic, the Coptic Catholics, or the Armenian or in communion Catholic, or all these other, the Malankara Catholics, the Chaldeans Catholics. So all of these are not Catholics, because there was only one lex orandi which was enforced in the entire Catholic Church. Again, shows you the either ignorance, the evil, or the stupidity of this Grillo guy. I said, I think probably his brain got grilled. If someone tells me he is faithful at the same time to the Novus Ordo and Vetus Ordo, I reply that he does not understand the meaning of tradition, within which there is within which there illegitimate and insuperable progress that is irreversible. Okay. Actually, Grillo, I will make it easy on yourself. I am not at the same time faithful to the Novus Ordo and the Vetus Ordo. I totally and utterly and completely reject the, using the Paul VI words, which I never tire of repeating, the liturgical novelty of the new rite, the liturgical innovation of the new rite. No, I totally reject the Novus Ordo. I will only go to the Novus Ordo if I have zero other options. And even then, I would have to find a church which offers the Novus Ordo in a reverent manner. Otherwise, I have no option other than not to go. So, but no, Grillo, I'll make it easy for you. There's truth and error. There's tradition and novelty. There's the Vetus Ordo and the Novus Ordo. And there is no peace. There's Jesus Christ and Belial. So no, make it easy for you. Only the ancient liturgies, only the ancient rites, only according to the creed of the Trent and the creed of Vatican I and the decrees of Trent and the decrees of the ancient councils. I accept and embrace the liturgical and ecclesiastical and apostolic traditions of the Church, and the received and approved rites customarily, traditionally used in the administration of the solemn sacraments of the Church, which is the Vetus Ordo. So the Novus Ordo is garbage. It's toilet paper. It's human waste. So make it easy for you. No, I totally reject the Novus Ordo. Only the traditional rite, because that is the Catholic way. This is the traditional manner. This is according to the creed, which is an article of the creed which we quoted at the beginning, Grillo. And if you reject that article of the faith, you are not Catholic. You are not a Christian. So he says basically that, no, you don't understand. The Vetus Ordo, the old tradition, is always progressing in an like you cannot stop this progress, and this progress is irreversible. So why are people rejecting it and returning to the ancient liturgies? They try to brainwash themselves. This is like progress. It's irreversible. It's the destiny, and it cannot be changed. And nobody's saying there was no additions, accretions, actually even removals from the ancient liturgies, because the ancient liturgies were quite longer actually than the traditional Roman Rite. Longer readings, longer prayers. So, or even additions, like changes here and there. But these were organic, as Cardinal Ratzinger says. These happened organically over the centuries in various churches, and then finally were added to the universal rite. They were not some committee appointed by a man, and he says, okay, let's take all the liturgical books. Okay, let's cancel these prayers, remove these prayers. This is too offensive. Too much intercession of the saints, cancel, talk too much about hell, too much about judgment. Oh, wrath of God, delete that. Communion in the hand, kneeling in front of God. No, that's too Catholic. No, let's just introduce new novelties. And here's the Novus Ordo. This is our new rite. And we're thinking of actually introducing a Mexican rite or a Amazonian rite. Oh, let's make up an Indian rite. By artificial, this is it's not progress of tradition. This is artificial manufactured liturgy, false manufacturing process, as Benedict XVI called it. So there you go. Number 2. Let's just out of curiosity how many questions he asks him here. 7 questions. All right, we're on number 2 now. I knew it was going to take long, but let's just go. But I mean, you have to destroy their argument, and you have to explain to people why they are wrong and what basis are we talking about, on which basis, on what basis. We can't just say, oh, yeah, you're wrong, I'm going to adhere to tradition, I don't care what you say. No, you have to explain that they are wrong. Question number two. After the Paris Chartres 2024 pilgrimage with 18,000, close to 20, and that's not counting the Society of St. Pius pilgrimage, which goes from Chartres to Paris, which usually has another 10,000. An average age of 25, diocesan bishops, Cardinal Mueller of the Holy Roman Church, and extensive media coverage. Do you believe that the Church must now consider pastoral care for the traditional charism as well, like other movements that have arisen since the Second Vatican Council, or can it continue to deny the massive vitality of the ancient liturgy? So again, I wouldn't reject a special charism, because this special traditional charism is the intrinsic, organic, ontological charism of the Church. It is not some special, okay, well, you guys can be traditional Catholics, you can adhere to the traditional charism, but the must be the charism of the entire Church. Professor Grillo, what are 18,000 people compared to the great multitudes of the Catholic Church? Great multitude who do not believe most of the Catholic faith, as you yourself don't. Little more than a sect. So all these traditional young Catholic, young faithful Christians walking for 3 days in the rain and the mud to pray to God, pray the liturgy, pray the rosary, worship God, receive Him in reverence. They're a sect. Show me this kind of fervor among your people. Show me Novus Ordo people going on a march for 3-4 days in the mud and rain, and let me see their faith. Show me. So it's a little more than a sect that experiences infidelity. An infidel calling the faithful infidels as salvation, and is often linked to moral and political positions. Moral, yes, because there is truth and error. There is right and wrong. But these people, Grillo, Jorge, his junta, Fernandez, who wants to bless same-sex couples, bless their union, because he is blessing couples, so he's blessing unions. That's why the Coptic Orthodox Church broke ecumenical dialogue with the Roman Church, because they said this is just one step too far. This is beyond heretical. That's it. We can't even talk to you people. We want to, who am I to judge? Let's bless you guys as a couple, meaning you are blessing their acts as a couple, which have led to the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. It was not for lack of hospitality. No, but the people wanted to know these visitors. To know in biblical terms is to have sexual relations with them, like Adam knew his wife. It's not about hospitality. So yeah, moral rigidity. They're morally rigid. They're inflexible. They're judgmental. Yeah, that's why Amoris Laetitia again had a bit of a moral problem. That's why 1,500 scholars and priests declared Francis to have fallen into the delict of heresy. And they go through the whole. I watched my previous video on the document. I just cited it. All the errors of Amoris Laetitia, which are of a moral nature. Because in that document it says, well, even though God has these commandments, it sometimes is actually the right thing to do is not obey the commandment. And God would actually appreciate that. And it says even, sometimes people are not capable of following the commandments of God. So God is commanding the impossible, which is, of course, contrary to the Catholic faith and Scripture. So yeah, it is linked to moral, meaning truth. But you adhere, Grillo, to error. And political positions, meaning he means, of course, right wing, the far right, which is simply what we don't want to have our countries overburdened by illegal immigration. We do not want to be engaged in wars. We do not want the brainwashing of us and our children by the LMNOP, PAS 2 HYZ propaganda. We want to preserve the dignity of marriage between one man and one woman, and there's simply only two sexes, male and female. Gender is a word used for language, not for human beings. There are no genders, there are sexes, the male sex and the female sex. So these are various political positions, which they, of course, are Catholic positions. But of course, for him, not being Catholic, not being Christians, these moral and political positions are offensive and are very concerning customs. Oh man, they pray the rosary too much, they do penance, they fast, they pray, they go to Mass almost every day, they go on pilgrimages. Oh, these are very, very concerning customs. Bad. It isn't by changing words that things get better. Tradition and traditionalism cannot be equated. In a sense, again, it depends what you mean by traditionalism. Traditionalism is not one among many movements, even though it may have characteristics that are partly similar to some of the more fundamentalist movements that were inappropriately favored over the last 40 years. More fundamentalist. Again, what do you mean? Catholic, Protestant fundamentalist movements? Or do you mean like Catholic fundamentalists? I mean integralist. I mean the French call the traditionalists integrists, the integralists. I think Pius X himself thought about being an integralist, an integrist, to hold to the integral Catholic faith. This is the function. Keep the faith once for all delivered to the saints. Do not follow a perverted gospel. Even if we or an angel from heaven preach to you a different gospel than the one you have already in the past received, let him be anathema. So this is holding to the integral faith. This is the fundamental faith. So tradition is, one must adhere to tradition. What does traditionalism mean exactly in his idea? Who knows? That's maybe he explains. But a form of, so the traditional movement, or traditionalism, this is what he means, I guess. Traditionalism is a form of denial of the Second Vatican Council that cannot but be clearly obstructed within the ecclesiastical experience. Again, what do you mean by, this is what the deniers of Vatican II claim others, exactly like, the Democrats accuse the Republicans. They do the thing and they accuse them of the same thing. they collude with, like Hillary colludes with Ukraine and Britain and Russia, creating the dossier on Francis. So, but they accuse on Trump, and then they accuse Trump of colluding with Russia. They do the thing that they do. They accuse him of persecuting political opponents when they are the ones persecuting him. It's the exact same thing. I wish I brought it up. I mentioned, you can just maybe search it for yourself. It's from the Vatican website. You'll find it. It is, I think, in 1966, Cardinal Ottaviani writes a letter to the bishops of the Catholic world, condemning those using Vatican II to introduce false teaching about Scripture, about the Incarnation, about the Church, about salvation. And he says that's not what the Council document said. And either him or somebody else, again, one of the writers says, these people use and I think even Grillo or somebody says, it doesn't matter what the text of the council, we're just kind of like the springboard, the beginning. We're going with the spirit, with the direction, with the idea, even if it contradicts the very text of the council. So when he says we deny the Second Vatican Council, no, we don't. We accept it in the words of Cardinal Ratzinger in 1988 to the Chilean bishops, saying that you people, like there are so many of you, who treat the Second Vatican Council as a start from zero, as a super dogma, as a super council that erased all the past. And if that happens, then it is meaningless. Vatican II is meaningless. It's nothing. It has no legs to stand on. It has to be treated as part of the entire tradition of the Church. This is Cardinal Ratzinger, 1988, to the Chilean bishops under Pope John Paul II. He's the head of the Congregation for the Faith. So he accuses them and others like them, like Grillo and Francis and their ilk and their junta, of treating Vatican II as a start from zero, as an end of tradition, as the super council, as a super dogma. And he says, even though that particular council defined no dogma at all and chose to restrict itself to being a merely pastoral council. And these are virtually the verbatim words of Benedict Ratzinger, Cardinal Ratzinger in 1988 to the Chilean bishops. So what do you mean by denying Vatican II? For him, Benedict XVI would have been denying Vatican II because he tried to do the hermeneutics of continuity, meaning if Vatican II teaches something which seems novel, we try to interpret it according to what has been passed. We do not interpret the past according to Vatican II. We interpret Vatican II because it is a pastoral council, defined no dogma or doctrine. We have to interpret it. Even Paul VI, in one of they had a dubia or a question to him. I think at the end of Lumen Gentium, I can't remember, he says, well, if it seems novel, then you can question or you can look at the past. You don't have to adhere to it. I quoted it previously. I don't have it was not part of the actual document. It was like post document. It's a question. Anyways, so what do you mean by that? He would have said, Benedict he's denying Vatican II. He's obstructing the council because he's interpreting it according to tradition. Or he tried his best to make it more orthodox, things which seemed not in contradiction to the past. He tried to make them in conformity to the past. But yeah, they throw these accusations without really saying anything. Yeah, we reject novelties, like some, again, if you read it regarding, say, I'm not going to rehash it. Watch my previous video. I mentioned a few points. No, we don't deny Vatican II. Yeah, it was an ecumenical council. It was a council, but it was a pastoral council, a merely pastoral council which defined no dogma. And it is, in fact, since it defined no dogma or doctrine, it is, in fact, the least of all ecumenical councils, and indeed even less status than some of the old regional councils which actually defined dogma and doctrine. All right, so I accepted them on that basis. Okay. The church is not a club of notaries and lawyers who cultivate their aesthetic passions or plan to instrumentalize the church as the most famous museum. Actually, no. You hate the ancient liturgy because it's living. It's living tradition, as you like to use the word. It's living tradition. It's the tradition received, as the church has taught, and it is living. It is vibrant. It's creating vocations and converting people to the faith. It is not a museum, a dead museum. Your museum is your 1969 fabricated liturgy. That is the museum. That is the giving us the empty churches and the deformed faith and the atheism and the falling of hundreds of millions of Catholics to Protestantism, heresy, agnosticism, paganism even, and atheism, of course. This is the museum you created in 1969. It's old and garbage now. But the living tradition of the ancient liturgy is and it is, who's talking about aesthetics, passions? It is offering God due worship, worthy worship. Read the Old Testament, Grillo, if you know how to read. What God demanded, the liturgy. Look at the rage of Jesus Christ at the money changers in the temple. It wasn't because they're money, no, because they were ruining, they were changing the awe, the prayerfulness, the sacredness of the temple, turning into a marketplace, like they're turning the churches into concert halls. Let's go to number 3. In your view, how is it that especially the Anglophone and Francophone regions, there is considerable increase in the number of faithful, seminarians, conversions, financial offerings, and large families in traditionalist areas, while there is clear and serious quantitative crisis in the Novus Ordo parishes, at least in the Western world? Absolutely true. So how does Grillo? So Jesus Christ himself, by their fruits you shall know them. So what are the fruits of the traditional parishes, traditional liturgies? Vocations, faith, families, children, devotion, prayer, sacrifice, financial and otherwise. Even adhesion to maybe a bit too much to a bishop who hates them, or at least tolerates them. But these are the fruits. And what are the fruits of the Novus Ordo? Empty seminaries, shutting down religious orders, shutting down seminaries, shutting down churches, amalgamating churches, parishes, paying hundreds of millions in damages to priests who like to abuse little boys. Because, if there is no truth, there is no error, there is no moral, there is no immoral, who cares? There was a priest recently, maybe a year ago or 2 years ago, he had basically a satanic ritual on an altar in the church. He had 2 escorts brought, and he had sexual relations with them on the altar in the church, a Catholic priest of the Novus Ordo, of course. Anyways, Professor Grillo continues. We are dealing here. Oh, so he asked him, okay, how do you explain all these booming vocations and financial giving and building of churches and new foundations of monasteries compared to the decline and almost death of the Novus Ordo parishes? So what does Grillo say? We are dealing here with a distorted vision. Is it a distorted vision? Well, do you wear glasses, Grillo? I don't know. Maybe you need glasses, because that's not a distorted vision. This is the actual vision. And that is the reason Traditionis Custodis came down, is to shut down this expansion, to stop this expansion of the ancient liturgy. And that is the reason why the Vatican sends apostolic visitation to traditional orders, shutting them down, trying to take over them, forcing them to conform to the new rite. Okay, let's continue. Especially in the Western world, the faith is facing a crisis. Oh, why? Why? When did this crisis start? In significant manner. Not under Pius XII. Even then, John the 23rd, the churches were booming and full. What happened? Oh, the introduction of the liturgical innovation, the liturgical renewal, the doctrinal renewal, the ecclesiastical renewal. And then you have the crisis of faith. Because if you tell people for 2,000 years, this, even Paul VI in the Code, which I'm going to finish up the video with some of his 2 speeches, he talks about this is our heritage, about the ancient liturgy, our heritage, our patrimony. These are the prayers of our fathers. And it seemed like this is unchangeable, irreplaceable, these are eternal. When we tell people, even the Pope himself, Paul VI himself says that. And then suddenly you tell people, okay, you know what? We're going to swipe that all, take it away from you. We're going to change everything about the church. We're going to alter all the prayers. We're going to change the priest turning to face you. We're going to give communion in your hand, which we told you this is the most sacred of sacred things. You have just destroyed the faith of billions. Millions, hundreds of millions of Catholics, and even Those who think, oh, should I be a Catholic? Well, obviously everything they've said for 2,000 years is garbage. You're facing a crisis of faith. That began more than a century ago. Yeah, well, it started with the modernist heretics, like yourself, who have infiltrated the church, and Pius X tried to stop them. But up to even the Vatican II, the churches were booing. They're building churches, hundreds of thousands of new conversions to the Catholic faith. Yeah, there was a start of a crisis which was combated. But the heretic modernism is the synthesis of all heresies. Everything is according to our understanding. The evolution. I have a video again. It's called development of doctrine versus evolution of doctrine, as I recall. Or just search it under that term, because there was a whole big long article in Vatican News a few years back, where it was basically promoting, under Francis, the evolution of doctrine. Meaning, oh yeah, we understood it this way, this in the past, but now we understand it this way. Or the meaning was this in the past, now the meaning has changed in the future. This is evolution of doctrine, not development, meaning like, okay, we now understand it further, deeper, but it's still the same meaning, the same doctrine, no change. There's a complete difference. But this century ago, the modernist infiltration introduced the evolution of doctrine. The faith of the people is the one which actually determines the truth. This is what Grillo adheres to, and accelerated dramatically over the last 50 years. Oh, what happened in the last 50 years, Grillo? Now use your psychic powers and your vision and your professorship understanding. What happened more accelerated after 50 years ago? 50 year 1970. So after Vatican II and the introduction of the new rites and the new ecclesiology and the new understanding and the new lack of discipline, there is a direct correlation. You do this, this happens. You did this, bam, you got what you planted. You got the fruit of your novelty. But he doesn't seem to get that. But the crisis is not responded to by restoring the honor society way of life. What do you mean by that? No, by restoring the ancient liturgy, by ancient discipline, the ancient faith, the ancient doctrine, the ancient discipline, the ancient dogmas, the ancient rituals, the ancient way of doing things, the ancient ecclesiology, the ancient honor of the popes and bishops, the ancient morality. It isn't a cape magne, which is the big long cope which a lot of times Cardinal Burke wears, or dead languages. Dead languages. Listen to how Paul VI, first of all, John the 23rd, lauded Latin and told people to. John, the Pope of the Council, he has a document on the Latin language and how it is important. Paul VI laments and cries basically in his speeches when he's introducing his novelty that, it's no longer going to be Latin but new languages, and it's such a shame and such a loss and such a tragedy. That's what Paul VI himself says. That strengthens the faith. Actually, what strengthens the faith, Grillo, as I've said previously, if you want to actually have the ancient Roman Rite, it has to be maintained in Latin, of course, but you can have, say, one Mass a week or two Masses a week. It depends. They say a church has, say, 3 Masses a week. You can have one or maybe even two of them have even that, I don't think now with missals, hand missals, and internet with your phone, you can follow the Mass word for word. You don't need, you're not like in need of having it translated, because you have it. You have it in your hand, in your cell phone or your missal. You don't need it translated, period. I was in Hungary. I was in Budapest. I went to Mass. And I didn't understand Hungarian, of course. Actually, I attended Mass in Vienna. I didn't understand German. The only thing I didn't understand in the Mass was the sermon. Other than the sermon, I fully participated in the liturgy, not as a silent spectator, but fully in a sung, beautiful traditional Roman rite. Fully understood everything, including the readings, because I had them on my phone. This allowed me to fully participate in the liturgy, even though I was not in a country I understood the language. But if it was fully, I entered actually a Hungarian church, and the mass was going on fully in Hungarian. I stood there for a bit. Okay, I don't understand a word, or what are you doing? I think he was talking, maybe it was the sermon. But anyways, it was like fully in Hungarian. I just looked at the church, beautiful, nice church, nice. I wasn't intending to attend mass anyways. I would have, but I didn't, and I just left. But with the traditional liturgy, you understand. And what strengthens the faith, Grillo? It is, like you said at the beginning, the lex orandi, the law of prayer. And that is what Annibale Bonini, the architect of the new rite, himself did. He said that he removed from the liturgy anything which may be a stumbling block for our separated brethren, meaning, of course, the Protestants, because it would not have been a stumbling block for the Orthodox or the Oriental Orthodox, because virtually they have the same faith. So he watered down the liturgy, watered down the doctrine of the faith, watered down anything about hell, intercession of saints, judgment of God, the need for penance and fasting, and a lot of Catholic delete, remove, slash, cut down, make it, change the language to make it less offensive, less judgmental. And that's what destroyed the faith in the last 50 years. So how do you strengthen the faith? By restoring the lex orandi, the law of prayer received by the Catholic Church and customarily used in the administration of the sacraments. Because the way you pray, lex orandi, the law of prayer, lex credendi is the law of faith. You pray in a semi-Protestant manner, in a watered-down manner, you believe a watered-down faith, and you lose the faith. You accelerate the faith, the destruction of faith. That's why you find the flourishing in the traditional communities. Why? Because they have the lex orandi, which strengthens their faith. Okay, let's continue. These only reinforce bonds of identity, forms of fundamentalism. Bonds of identity, being Catholic, holding on to the Apostolic Liturgy, forms of fundamentalism. Yes, there is truth, there is error, there is good, there is bad, there is virtue, there is sin. Oh, these are very fundamentalist things. And intransigism, meaning they are rigorous. They will not, they said, the apostles said, stand firm and hold on to the faith once for all, this delivered to sin. Do not deviate, stand firm. Oh, this is intransigism for Grillo and the heretics in charge in Rome. But this is apostolic. This is evangelical. That are no longer those of 100 years ago, but that have taken on unprecedented forms, where a Catholic identity, which in terms of its Catholicism is little more than an idealized label, is espoused with the height of postmodern life. Well, because you need to hype it these days, because the world has become anti-Catholic. The church has become anti-Catholic. So we have to emphasize Catholic identity, Catholic, Christian, faithful to God, to his church, to the tradition received. 100 years ago, all of Europe were Christian, at least in name. And 95% of Italy was fully Catholic. France, Catholic. Spain, Catholic. There is no need for a Catholic identity. But in a Spain, which is an anti-Catholic entity now, we need to stand up and say, no, we're Catholic. A Catholic identity. And we need to restore Spain to a Catholic faith, or Europe, or the world. This is not an ecclesial or spiritual phenomena. It is a phenomena of customs and forms. Well, if you read the fathers, the councils, here, the councils, the writings of the popes, the writings of the church, the decrees of Trent, the profession of faith of Trent, and the profession of faith of Vatican I. We are to hold on to. Where did I go here? We are to hold on to customs, whether and forms, whether ecclesiastical or apostolic. This is part of being Catholic, to hold on to the customs. We are to hold on to the customs of the received customs, received traditions of the fathers. This is being Catholic. That has little to do with the authentic tradition of the Catholic. And what is the authentic tradition of the Catholic Church? Novelty, innovation. Like Francis pretends to quote St. Vincent of Lerins, which I have again a video on. I have actually not Francis. I have the full St. Vincent's of Lerins, where he teaches about you have to adhere to the faith once for believed from the beginning by all and everywhere, and you have to reject novelty. And he talks about what happens if most of the church falls into heresy. What do we do? Watch that video. But Francis, the promoter of novelty, claims to quote St. Vincent of Lerins as promoting novelty. Yani, I just said an Arabic word. Yani, unbelievable. Anyways, meaning. Question number 4. So, in this situation of a dearth, meaning lack, of seminarians, and a death toll of young faithful, its churches are empty. Go to Quebec. Watch Quebec is a province in Canada, the French province, which was like 95% Catholic, which has beautiful churches, which was full of vocations and monasteries and churches. Turn on your TV, and if you're in Canada, or you can probably find it on YouTube, any Sunday Mass in Quebec on a Sunday. Look at the people. I would say 95% of them are very old, all with white hair. No even people in their 50s and 60s and 40s and 30s. No children. The church in Quebec, from being the center of Catholicism in Canada, is virtually dead. So why in your view does Pope Francis, at least apparently, seem to consider only traditionalist faithful who pray una cum Papa nostro Francesco, meaning in the canon of the Mass, the central prayer, the Roman canon, the Eucharistic prayer 1, which is, of course, all the other ones now are fabrications, inventions. Even the ones they claim to come from St. Hippolytus, it doesn't. And in the canon of the Mass, actually even St. Augustine, who went to convert Britain, he actually writes, I think, to Pope Gregory. I can't remember now, but in one of these old Penguin classic books, and he has this conversation. It's like, okay, now I'm in England, and I'm how is the liturgy I'm going to do? What kind of Mass? He basically tells them, do exactly what you've been doing, and especially for the canon of the Mass, just keep it as is. That's the most important one, which is the most ancient part of the liturgy. And in the liturgy, we say, we pray with our Pope or our Father, and you name the Pope reigning. In this case, Francisco. Well, and in this case, I guess the Pope Regent, the Bishop Administrator of the Vatican of Rome, Francisco. So he tells them, like, because there are those sede vacantes who say, well, there's no Pope since like Pius XII. There's not. And why do you even accept Pius XII as Pope? I'm just talking to the sede vacantes there. Why do you accept even Pius XII as Pope? Because Pius XII is the one who appointed Bonini, who destroyed the Roman Rite. Pius XII, who mutilated the Holy Week liturgies of the Traditional Rite. with Bonini's help. So why hasn't Pius as well fallen from the papacy and an anti-pope? Maybe you should go further back. Just as an aside. Anyways, because these people will not say una cum with Pope so-and-so, even with Benedict or John Paul II or anybody. So he tells them, like, even though these are faithful Catholics, who when the Mass is celebrated, they pray that we are in union with our Father Francis. And they are growing more and more. Why does Pope Francis somehow seem to treat them as enemies when they actually pray that we are with you, Francis? Professor Grillo says, first, the dearth of seminarians and young people fleeing is not just a negative fact. Is not just a negative fact. Well, yeah, it is. Is the sign of a necessary travail in the entire church. So it's like a woman giving birth. It's like a pain and travail and suffering of the entire. So this lack of seminarians and the young people fleeing away. Why would, like, the and I'm starting to see it kind of concerning in my teenage nieces. It's like and nephews, and they starting, well, their kids different, but when they're getting older in the teenage years, they're starting to feel like, oh man, I have to go to Mass now, because they go to the Novus Ordo liturgy. It is boring. I mean, I can understand. It is like, what am I doing here? It's just sitting there, okay, well, boring. You don't feel the sense of sacredness. You don't feel the sense of worship. You don't feel the sense of awe. They'd rather go watch a concert with flashes and lights and something which is amazing to them, instead of just sitting in a church which is a boring liturgy. Let's be honest, it is boring, with boring music and actually badly performed music and singing. Is this the greatest? We go to the traditional liturgy, it's awe-inspiring, especially a solemn high mass or a high mass with chanting and singing and altar boys, which are actually doing something, moving things. You go to the Novus Ordo Mass, which I have one next to me, which I would go to if I don't end up going to the traditional liturgy. He has the altar boys and everything, I don't know, but they do nothing. They just sit there, and the priest does everything. He moves the missal, the book. He brings out they do, like, what's the point of the altar boys? To accompany him to bring in the gifts, and they're just sitting there on the side. What's the point of them? So young people, it's boring. It's boring for them. And then it's like, well, why should I go? And he says, is it important, mommy? Should I go? I've got school. I've got homework. Okay, don't. So they stop going for a few times, and then they reach a certain age, and it's like, I'll go on Easter and Christmas maybe. So yeah, and Grillo, what did this, who and what in the last 50 years, what happened 55 years ago? I don't know, nothing. No, it's the openness, the openings to the world, the openness to the world, the changing of the liturgy, the dumbing down of our doctrines and dogmas, everybody's a Christian, we're all saved, everybody's ecumenism, Catholic Church is the only true church. Come on, man. It's like, liturgy, let's invent a new one. Let's make it look like an Anglican liturgy. Let's make it more Protestant. Who cares? Communion, the Eucharist is the very body of God. Is it God incarnate? It's not Christ in the bread, but is the bread himself Christ? It looks bread, but it's not bread. It looks, but hey, we can just take, put it in my hand like a potato chip, give it to myself, have little girls and women distributing the Eucharist. So what makes them special? If they can grab it, I can grab it. Who cares? Is this really the body of Christ? Is this really the blood of Christ? So you have destroyed the faith of the people. You have introduced this travail of the entire church. Now, that doesn't happen in the traditional liturgy. Of course, you have people defecting and leaving, and as it always been forever and ever. But it's not because of the liturgy. It's not because of the way of the lex orandi and the discipline. No, it is in spite of it. But in the case of the Novus Ordo, it is because of it. So, the easy solutions, i.e., let us fill traditional seminaries with militarized young men modeled on the 17th and 18th century priests. Militarized. So he recognizes. So what you mean? The easy solutions is we let these militarized, meaning strong, virile, not effeminate men fill these seminaries who modeled after 17th and 18th century priests, meaning priests willing to preach the faith once for all delivered to the saints, meaning men, real men. So if this eases, we should admit, is this possible? Because they are full. The traditional seminaries are up to now full. Our only blunders. So if we allow traditional seminaries to grow, are blunders. That's why Francis has been clamping down on traditional seminaries, convents, monasteries, dioceses, whose costs are primarily borne by those. The costs of this are borne by those involved. Poor militarized young men, being priests of Christ forever according to the order of Melchizedek. Poor men. We'd rather have empty seminaries, empty churches, and no faith. That's the church we want, Grillo says. They don't generate a life of faith, but often great resentment and personal hardening. They don't generate a life of faith, these traditionalist priests and seminarians and seminaries. They don't generate a life of faith. How do you define that? People praying, people going to Mass, people confessing their sins, people going to pilgrimages, people praying the rosaries, people loving each other and having large families, teaching their children to grow in the faith of Christ and the love of Christ. Is that not generating faith? But for him, this is not faith. This is rigorism. This is hardening. For him, faith is basically don't believe. This is the faith he wants. A non-belief. A faith that we're all good, we're all saved, we all worship the same, no matter what religion, we all worship the same God, but maybe in different ways, as Francis himself said recently. There is no just one Church of Jesus Christ. Christ came and saved all people. There's different means of salvation. We can't be judgmental of people who sin. There's no such thing really as sin. It's this state of life. We love them. So, which is basically no religion, no faith, no Christianity. But of course, this is the faith he wants. But traditional seminaries will generate a true faith, a true lex orandi, a true lex credendi, which he despises, and Francis despises. I wouldn't worry about Pope Francis perceiving this as a danger. So why did he issue Traditionis Custodis, trying to destroy the ancient lex orandi, the law of prayer? I was much more concerned that his predecessors, where is your faithfulness to Rome, Grillo, saw it as an asset. So he was worried that these people saw this increase of faith and increase of monasteries, increase of tradition as an asset. This is horrible, according to him. Nostalgia is never an asset. Restore all things in Christ, as Paul says. Hold on to the faith once for all delivered, as Paul says. Hold on to the traditions, as the church has always said. Hold on to the apostolic and ecclesiastical traditions, observances, and constitutions of the church. You have to accept them and embrace them. That's not nostalgia. You have to receive and accept the rites of the Catholic Church, which have been received and approved in the solemn administration of all the sacraments. Because why? This is true Catholic faith, outside of which none can be saved. This is the Catholic faith. But for him, this is nostalgia. Nostalgia is never an asset, even when it deludes one into thinking that the church has nothing to reform. Well, the church has deformed in the past 50 years much, much more. So now we actually have to reform the reform, meaning have to repair the damage done. But only finds all the answers in the past. Yes, as hold on to the traditions. This is the faith. St. Paul says, hold on to the traditions which I have given to you, whether by word, meaning verbally, or by epistle. We have to hold on to the traditions. And the words, the traditions received by word are imbued, are passed on primarily through the words, the gestures, the prayers of the liturgies, the ancient liturgies. That's why the liturgies, the ancient apostolic rites of all the rites of the church, pass on the apostolic faith, the ancient Christian faith. So yes, it is found in the past, because the past is the future. The past is the living tradition. Not the way you want to pervert it, meaning living tradition, meaning we can alter tradition. No, tradition is tradition. It's being lived. Praying una cum papa isn't achieved with mere chatter. So he calls the most solemn prayer of the Mass mere chatter. But by sharing with the church. So what? The Pope is the church. The church is the Pope, as I was talking about in the previous video about Don Pietro Leone, whether Pope Francis is Pope, and if he's not Pope, what is he then? And above all, the Pope. The one ordo in force, the one, there can only be one. The church has never only had one ordo, ever. Even in the West, we had many ordos. The Roman ordo, the Sarum ordo, the Milanese ordo, the Ambrosian ordo, the Mozarabic ordo, the Ordo of Braga, the various cathedrals, even Paris Cathedral had their own ordo. The various Carthusian ordo, the Dominican ordo, and of course now we talk about the rest of the church, the Chaldean ordo, the Byzantine ordo, the Ethiopic ordo, the Coptic ordo, the Armenian ordo. There was never one ordo, but he, in his mind, would love to abolish all and everyone and impose the one fabricated liturgy of Paul VI, and then allow that liturgy to mutate into a billion forms, but it is still the one ordo. Otherwise, one chatters but lives in opposition to tradition. You are the one living in opposition to tradition. Francis is the one living in opposition to tradition. Your whole idea is tradition is false, because tradition is the one what we have received. As Paul says, if anybody teaches you another gospel Paul says, hold on to the traditions you have received. Don't give them up. This is according to the entire teaching and history of the church. You are claiming tradition is basically whatever the Pope says. That is tradition. I'm going to invent brand new liturgies. That's tradition. I'm going to banish all the ancient rites and impose just one of my own creation. That is tradition. No, that is anti-tradition. Number 5. Is it possible that a ritual form that for a very long time was the normative one of the Catholic Church? Again, this is, I should say, the Roman Church, or the Roman Catholic Church, because it's not the full Catholic Church, okay, as an aside, can now no longer have a place among the so many other rites of the Catholic Church itself. inter alia with the Masoretic, Ambrosian, Chaldean, St. John Chrysostom, Armenian, like I was mentioning. As I said, I didn't read this article, so I'm just responding to it as I go. Why not make the traditional charism coexist in the great diversity of ecclesiastical charisms? Again, I have to take an issue with that point. It is not an ecclesiastical charism. It is not a liturgical charism. These are churches. Like the Chaldean is a church. St. John Chrysostom is the liturgy, is the rite of the Byzantines. The Armenian is the rite of the Armenians of church. So in the Roman, we have the Roman Rite, which is the Vitus Ordo. But in the Roman Church, if you're going to, meaning the Roman Church in an expansive manner, it wasn't just the Roman Rite, it was the predominant one, especially after the Council of Trent. Because prior to the Council of Trent, the Roman Rite, the rite used in Rome itself, was a minor rite. Vast majority, the whole of Great Britain had their own liturgies. It's all based on the Roman Rite, because they were, France had, variations. Spain had their own, again, Masoretic rites. So these are all part of the Roman Rite, as we could call them. But of course, he means, of course, now we'll have the Novus Ordo and all the ancient rites, including the traditional rite of Rome, as charisms. No, they're not charisms. The ancient rite of Rome is the Roman Rite. The false Roman Rite, rite of Paul VI, the novelty has to be eliminated and thrown in the garbage. Well, if see, that's why they're afraid of allowing the ancient Roman Rite to expand everywhere, because it is bringing the beauty, the doctrine, the holiness, the awe of true ritual, of true worship of God, not man worshiping himself in a circle, having a meal, but a worship and a sacrifice. They don't want to, because it is being a stark, clear distinction now. Truth and error, beauty and ugliness, engagement and boredom. And this will completely annihilate their forms. Okay, we must not be afraid of the diversity of charisms in the church. On the contrary, we must rejoice in living this diversity. See, Francis talks about diversity, but he's the dictator pope. He knows no diversity. He himself, there's one rite. The fabricated liturgy of 1969 is the only lex orandi, the law of prayer of the church. Oh yeah, okay. Professor Grillo. Here again, the question reveals a rather weighty misunderstanding. Or on the other hand, I recognize that your question echoes one of the strongest and least justifiable motivations that mark the season of Summorum Pontificum, which actually, as I said, Cardinal Ratzinger, Benedict XVI, basically said exactly what Summorum Pontificum said, I believe in the 1980s or the early 90s, which I'm going to do a video on. Watch for it. Under John Paul II, which means the thinking of John Paul II, to which you have become so attached that have almost made it your banner. At the heart of that document, in fact, was an argument that went like this: what earlier generations held as sacred remains sacred and great for us too. Yes, because you can't throw in the garbage what earlier generations have. Paul VI, in his, we're going to finish, he laments, this is the prayers of our fathers, the rituals of our fathers. It seems unbelievable that we should get rid of them. Paul VI. Where does this principle come from? Not from you and not from Francis, of course, because you are novelty whores, innovators. Not from theology. Read the ecumenical councils. Read the writings of the popes on the liturgy. Read anything and everything for the last 1960 years before Vatican II. But from nostalgic emotion for the past. where are we here? Such a principle tends to fixate the church in its past, because if you throw the past, you have thrown your very foundation. You are creating a new church, which is exactly what they want to do. With a new liturgy, a new theology, a new ecclesiology. And then it is not the Catholic Church if you do that. Not on the depositum fidei, meaning the deposit of faith. Actually, as I have harped on enough in this video, it is upon the deposit of faith. It is upon the creed, the profession of faith, that we have to accept and embrace the apostolic and ecclesiastical traditions and all other observances and constitutions of the church. And likewise, that we receive and accept the rites of the Catholic Church, which have been received and approved in the solemn administration of all the aforesaid sacraments. So Grillo, who've got like crap for brains or what, it is the depositum fidei. It is the deposit of faith. But on the vesture it wore, in a season as if it were definitive. That there have been throughout history ritual forms that are recognized in their otherness depends on the specific tradition of places, of religious orders. No one could ever, no one could ever think that the universal level anyone would be allowed the freedom to remain in one version of the Roman Rite. No one would be allowed the freedom to remain in one version of the Roman Rite. This freedom has always been there. All the religious order had their own rites. The various cathedrals had their own rites. Pius V, after issuing his revised missal of the Roman Curia, said you can stay in your own right if it is older than 200 years old. So traditional, not novel. This is the... So, I mean, I guess this would go as well. You can their own version. No, it's not their own version. It is the received and approved version, or in the version that has been, surpassed by general reform. Has it been surpassed? As I said, Cardinal Ratzinger, in the 1980s, said that the traditional Roman liturgy has never been abrogated, as if it could. So even if a pope attempted to say, I hereby, by my papal authority, banish and abrogate and forbid and abolish the ancient Roman liturgy, and you have to celebrate only the new rite, null and void, he does not have the power. He would become a schismatic, if not a heretic. It is contrary to the doctrine of the faith, the depositum fidei, as the Council of Trent declared in its Anathema, and as the Creed of Trent and the Creed of Vatican I declared. So it has not been surpassed. Paul VI simply issued his new missal. He said, okay, here's my missal. Please don't use the old missal, just use my missal. But he didn't actually banish. Even if he attempted, it would be null and void. And the rite cannot be used, and the rite cannot use the great Pauline ideas in such a shameless way. The freedom of charisms, and be thought of as feeding an anarchy from above. Who's talking about anarchy? As I said, go to like 10 different parishes in your diocese. It is anarchy. Everybody's celebrating Mass their own little way. This language, that language, drums, dances, altar girls, communion in the hand, pagan rituals added in for, the indigenous communities, indigenous rituals. This is anarchy of your fake Roman Rite, of your fraud of a rite, of your hoax of a liturgy. As the implementation of Motu Proprio Summorum Pontificum irresponsibly did. So he's like smarter than Benedict, smarter than everybody. Much better would have been to work at a single table. Yes, it would have been, I firmly agree, which means the complete abolition of the liturgical novelty of the new rite of Paul VI and have it at a single table, meaning the Roman rite is the traditional rite received from the apostles up to John the 23rd, but getting into the pre-1955 liturgy, full and complete, because at the 1955, tinkering with the received and approved rite started with Pius XII in the mutilation of the Holy Week liturgies, and then later on the removing of octaves and so forth. So yeah, let's return to the single table of the pre-1955 liturgy, which is the full Roman Rite, and then have all the ancient churches, as Benedict XVI himself said when he was talking about Summorum Pontificum, that all religious orders can return to the liturgy of their founders, meaning the Carthusians can return to the Carthusian Rite. The Carmelites can return to the ancient Carmelite Rite. The Dominicans can return to the ancient Dominican Rite, and so forth. So that everyone could contribute to enriching the only ritual in force. The only ritual in force. Is there such even one ritual in force? Yeah, okay. I don't want to talk about this. I mean, the wager of a mutual improvement between the Novus Ordo and the Viros Ordo was totally inadequate strategy and theology, fueled by ideological abstractness. Now I say, I fully agree with you, Grillo. The Novus Ordo could never enrich the Vitus Ordo. The novel cannot enrich the traditional. The fabricated liturgy cannot enrich the received and approved apostolic liturgy. Only the opposite may happen. The Vitus Ordo may give some ideas, which is exactly what happened. The Novus Ordo has nothing to give to the ancient Roman Rite. It is a total fabrication. It should be thrown in the garbage. It is a destroyer of faith. Number 6. Two more, 6 and 7. You have leveled heavy criticisms at the traditional liturgy. Grill for brains. Do you think that the faithful who prefer it also have the right to make similar criticisms of the liturgical reform? I prefer to say deform, which is the accurate term, or destruction. Or do you think that the critical analysis of the liturgy can only go in the direction of the theological current of which you are an authoritative exponent? So basically, hey, I mean, you're criticizing the ancient Roman Rite. Are we allowed to actually criticize the reform? Well, actually, I'm going to use the words of Benedict XVI, that the liturgical reform was a banal, on-the-spot fabrication that basically gave us stones instead of bread, and it was not what the council intended, and in fact, it was contrary to the decrees of Vatican II. This is what he said to Claus Gamber, and I've covered it many times previously. I'm going to go over it again. Okay, let's see what Grillo has to say. He's the brains of Francis. Okay, I don't reason according to factions or parties. I only try to read the tradition. You read the tradition, you are actually going exactly against the tradition. You are imposing an anti-tradition, a novelty, an innovation, and discover. So you're going to be the one who discovers. Oh, what did I do here? There we go. Okay, so I'm going to only read the tradition and discover. You're the discoverer. Okay, we're going to have to acquiesce to you. what we can do and what are not allowed to do. Oh yeah, you really see, they condemn rigidity, and they are the rigid. They talk about inclusivity, and they are the most exclusive. They talk about diversity, and they are the most anti-diversity. Everyone can critique any step of tradition. I am interested in is the steps being argued. The arguments of traditionalists are weak. Are they? Are they really? Are they weak? I think this video has shown who is the weak one. Because they deny what best describes tradition. What best describes tradition? According to who? You? Namely, its service to change. So see how these people newspeak of Orwellian newspeak. Tradition is change. Tradition is not keeping what was once for all received and passing it on, which is the very meaning of tradition, passing on what has been received. No, tradition is service to change. This Grillo is called novelty. This Grillo is called innovation. This Grillo is called anti-Catholicism, anti-Christianity, heresy. Those who challenge the liturgical reform done by committee, as in a manufacturing process by one man and his chosen cohorts, not by the church through the centuries and grew organically, have every right to speak out, but they cannot claim that their arguments are self-evident. Well, they are self-evident. They are. For example, one cannot infer from one's criticism of the reform of Holy Week. See, I was just mentioning this, and he brings it up. The right to resort to the rites prior to any reform of the Triduum, i.e. the rites prior to the 1950s, which are the rites of the most ancient church. This is like the most ancient part, other than the canon, the liturgy of Holy Week is the most ancient part of the entire liturgy. So yes, you have actually the Vatican allowed various societies to celebrate the pre-1955 reform for Holy Week. And who started this? Pius XII. And who did it? Bonini, the same architect of the destruction of the Roman Rite. Yes, of course, you have to return to the pre-deform, because the function of the Bishop of Rome is the upholder and preserver and guardian of and passer on of tradition, not the destroyer of tradition. Those who act in this way not only do not contribute to the ecclesiastical debate, while they can show clearly that the Reformed liturgy of Holy Week was a deform. Like I'll tell you one point was the for Holy Saturday. Was it Holy Saturday or Good Friday? I think it's Holy Saturday. Of course, they changed a lot of the liturgy, even in the traditional rite, under Pius XII for Holy Saturday. But for example, the readings. There were 12 readings because it was a true vigil. If you actually start from the ancient church, they would probably start from midnight or 1 in the morning. It would have taken them 5-6 hours if they chanted and prayed and preached and vigil till the sunrise, and then the Mass, the risen Christ happens. But there was 12 readings. In the post-19, in the reform of Holy Week, they have only 4. From 12 knocked down to 4. And one of the most important readings in all of Scripture for the Catholic Christian, for Christianity, is the story of Abraham having Isaac carrying the wood, like Christ carried the wood, and Abraham wanting to offer Isaac in sacrifice on the mount, which is Isaac is an image of Christ carrying the wood of the cross, going up to the mount to be sacrificed, and then God giving him the lamb instead of Isaac as a replacement sacrifice. And this is part of the image of the crucifixion of Christ, the image of Christ, Jesus himself. This reading is not anywhere in the entire 1962 Missal, not even once. So yeah, this by itself is worthy of condemnation for the reform of Holy Week. Those who act in that way do not contribute to the ecclesiastical debate, but objectively place themselves outside the Catholic tradition. Why? Because one man decided to alter the liturgy, so they're outside of the Catholic tradition? No, they are upholding the Catholic tradition. And however much they reaffirm their fidelity to the Pope, they are in fact refusing it, like you refuse fidelity to Pope Benedict XVI and his desires in Summorum Pontificum, Grillo. It is not so easy to avoid becoming sede vacantes in deeds before words. Well, when we are not, as Pope Benedict XVI himself said, the Pope is not an absolute monarch whose will is law. On the contrary, the Pope is the servant of truth. He is bound, he actually uses the word bound to the truth, bound to Scripture, bound to tradition, bound to the teaching of the Church. He is bound. He is not above Scripture, he is subject to Scripture. He is not above tradition, he is subject to tradition. He is the guardian. So, traditionally, we are not Pope worshippers. Not every word the Pope says or every decree, okay, that's it, God spoke. God spoke. No, he is the servant of the King. He is the vicar of the King. And to refuse, I mean, like a father would tell you, okay, you know what, your father in the family says, you know what, if you sin, it's no sin, you know, God will accept your sinning. This is what Francis did in Amoris Laetitia. Then you say, no, Father, you're wrong. I will not accept your words. Oh, Father says, okay, you know, we've been, like the Pope says, well, for example, if the Pope says, you know, you don't have to go to Mass every Sunday, don't bother praying, it takes too long, you know, maybe pray once in a while. You have to say, no, I will not obey you. Now, a Pope who says, you know what, I'm going to alter all the liturgies of the entire Church from the past, contrary to the doctrine of the faith, to the positive faith, to the decrees of the Council, the decrees of Trent, to the profession of faith of Trent, to the profession of faith of Vatican I, I'm going to do it, and you have to follow me and obey me, then you definitely have to say, using the words of St. Peter, I would rather obey God rather than men. Obey God rather than men. So, and St. Paul himself didn't say, confronted Peter to his face when Peter sinned. Finally, the final question. One final question. Do we believe that the liturgical reform has failed overall, as can be seen from the empty seminaries and churches, merged parishes and dioceses, etc.? By their fruits you shall know them, using the words of our God and Lord Jesus Christ, and that it has contributed to the crisis of the Church. We also think that to defend the liturgical reform, attempts are being made to portray as expected results what appears to us to be negative consequences. You do something, something happens, clear as day. But of course, these people are trying to deceive even the elect if possible, saying, oh, your eyes are deceiving you. Okay, this happened, we did this, and that happened. We told you that what you've been told for 2,000 years, that the liturgy is ancient, it's apostolic, it's reverent, you cannot change it, you have to pray it, believe it, go dive into it. Now we're going to change everything and throw it in the garbage. But it's the same thing. Of course, you're going to destroy people's faith. You have created the consequences. How would you try to change our minds? This is the final answer of Professor Grillo. Let's see what he says. And then we will finish up with a couple of words from... Anyways, let's finish up. Let's see what Grillo says. The brains of Francis. He is the brains of Francis for the liturgy. There are cases in the theological and liturgical debate in which the use of arguments can be doomed to failure. I never give up. Well, obviously, because you are always promoting the most evil thing possible. I would not be a theologian. You're not a theologian because you have completely contradicted the faith. If I did not trust in argumentation. But I recognize the difficulty. I use reasoning in these cases that is often difficult to understand. Even the well-known journalist, Vittorio Missori, has often fallen into the same error as you. Error of stating the clear, obvious, manifest facts. They're errors. As you have. You say the liturgical reform has failed. Well, if it didn't, we would have booming churches, the springtime of Vatican II, we'd have booming faith, we'd have full churches and Catholic schools and faithful marriages and baptisms and confirmations, and if it succeeded, because it would have passed on the riches of the faith. But it didn't, so it obviously failed. But let's see what he says here. You say that the liturgical reform has failed, and you reason in terms of numbers. Yeah, because they are objective. You think like this: if something in history is before something else, then what is before is the cause of what comes after. Yeah, that's called logic, especially when it deals with a thing specific. I can't say, well, we had a storm yesterday. We had maybe, I don't know how to say it. Let's say the liturgical reform. Let's say, we did the liturgical reform 50 years ago, and now we have planes which fly. Okay, these are completely no relation, obviously. But if you say we did the liturgical reform 50 years ago, and now a new lex orandi there, and now we have a lack of credendi, no faith, and empty churches and empty liturgies and empty seminaries, these are one-to-one. These are a direct line. You think like this: if something is in history is before something else, then what is before is the cause of what comes after. It is not difficult, thus, to believe that the responsibility for the evils of the 70s, 80s, 90s, up to 24 lie with the Second Vatican Council. Well, as I said, not necessarily the council itself, but it is the spirit of the council. And of course, because the council was so vague, you could do whatever you want. Even immediately after the council, Cardinal Ottaviani was talking about people perverting the council to preach heresy. And of course, Paul VI destroyed the liturgy, which people were told for 2,000 years, you can't touch that. It's the most sacred of the sacred things. Give me here a second. I'll bring some lights here. It's getting dark. I didn't notice. And particularly the liturgical reform. This way, let's see here. This way of reasoning, however, is not historically well-founded. Oh, isn't it? The crisis in the church began in great part before the emergence of liturgical thinking. Guéranger and Rosmini speak of a liturgical crisis as early as the 1830s and 40s. And they try to do the liturgical movement, which brought, but again, what's the liturgical crisis? Whoever at the beginning of the 20th century said, nobody knows what it is to celebrate anymore. Well, because people say things doesn't mean anything. But again, I have to agree with sometimes, even currently, you go to a traditional liturgy, a low mass especially, and the priest is mumbling to himself and the server. It's almost literally a silent mass. This is okay if you are a priest by yourself with your server, or at a monastery by yourselves. It's your private mass. That's fine. But when you're doing a low mass at a church, you have to say what is supposed to be in a low tone and a low tone, what in a high tone and a high tone, and it has to be audible for those in church. I did a video again called Let the Low Mass Be Audible Again, or something to that effect. According to the rubrics, it's not your personal mass. So if you just go mumbling, people are just sitting there, okay, well, I don't even know where I am. And I know the liturgy very well. And sometimes I get confused. Like, where is he exactly? I can't hear him. Is he saying the credo? Yeah, you don't know how to celebrate. That's why now you go. That's actually maybe a good thing with the crisis happened, because now all the traditional orders are very liturgy focused on how to celebrate the Mass correctly and beautifully, as it should be, as it was handed down to be. But you only ignore all of this, but tend to simplify things and think that if the reform had not taken place, we would still be in the church of the 50s. So basically, you're admitted that up to the 1950s, everything was booming. Churches were packed. So where was this crisis? So you're contradicting yourself, Grillo, right then and there. To change your mind, I think we should first reflect on the relationship between liturgy and ecclesial experience. What does that mean? Church experience. Being a disciple of Christ isn't a matter of belonging to a high society club or an association aimed at speaking a strange language or identifying with the past. If you don't have the past, you don't have the future. You don't have your foundation. Cultivating reactionary ideals. Tradition is not the past, but the future. Tradition is both the past and the future. That's why your Novus Ordo will go in the trash bin of history, Grillo. Since the church and faith are a serious matter, they cannot be reduced to the association of those who cultivate nostalgia to the past. So basically, he did not answer. He has no answer. He has no answer. He has no answer. That's all I'm going to say. I mean, it's obvious. He could not answer the obvious question. So here's the interview with Grillo there, giving us his middle finger, but obviously another brain-dead modernist heretic. He's the brains of Francis on the liturgy matters. So I'm getting a headache. I haven't had breakfast yet. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? Anyways, let's finish up. Let's finish up as I promised. Let me get the books here. Again, I might have to use my glasses. Let's bring in some more light as well. There we go. More light. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So, let's finish up. Let me see. What do I have here? Okay, so this is from Monsignor Claus Gamber. Before we get into it, I mentioned previously that there were other texts from the councils about tradition, keeping what we have received. Again, I didn't go through all my notes, but if you read them, you get the idea. Everything, you had to keep the customs of the fathers, the received traditions, the all of that. Let's have a look here. So this one is from the Council of Ephesus in 431. Council of Ephesus 431. And it's basically, let's see, is this the... Okay, Council of Ephesus 431. It says, anyways, I'm going to just give it a little, maybe even just a few words here. The Holy Synod declared. I'm not quote the full passage, but just sections. What is both in an, so it condemns something which is both an innovation against ecclesiastical customs and the canons of the Holy Fathers. And so they're condemning something which is against both, was an innovation against the ecclesiastical customs and the canons of the Holy Fathers. Condemned. And it talks about something must be according to the canons of the Holy Fathers and the ancient custom. That's from the beginning of the church. And they warn anyone who first things have to be restored, lest the canons of the fathers be transgressed. So laws of the fathers be so the ecclesiastical customs. So another quote that is from the Second Council of Nicaea in 787. And here, therefore, all those who dare think or teach anything different, or who follow the accursed heretics in rejecting ecclesiastical traditions. Remember the code, the Profession of Faith of Vatican I and Trent. So this is from 787. So therefore, if those who dare to think or teach anything different, or who follow the accursed heretics in rejecting ecclesiastical traditions, or who devise innovations, or who spurn anything entrusted to the church, whether it be the gospel or who fabricate perverted and evil prejudices against cherishing any of the lawful traditions of the Catholic Church. So these people are condemned. These people are condemned. And Canon 4 of the Council of Nicaea, anathemas on holy images. But holy images is part of traditions. So here's Canon 4. It says, if anyone, that includes a pope, or Grillo, or Fernandez, if anyone rejects any written or unwritten tradition of the church, let him be anathema. I'll read that again. If anyone rejects any written or unwritten tradition of the Catholic Church, let him be anathema. Okay. And the last one for the day here today, that's from the Council, same thing, Council of Nicaea. It says here, they also abandoned other customs which should now be renewed. So they have abandoned, for example, the Traditional Roman Rite. It has to be renewed, restored. And which should be in vigor in virtue of both written and unwritten legislation. Let him be deposed, or as someone who has flouted the ecclesiastical traditions. So if you flout ecclesiastical traditions, you are deposed. This is the constant, total, full teaching of the Catholic Church from the beginning. Now we come to the reform of the Roman liturgy. I've never done a review of the full book, but anyways, its problems and background by Monsignor Claus Gamber. In this book, there's a foreword by, I can't remember who, and this is the English version, but the original French version had the foreword by Cardinal Ratzinger, Benedict XVI, where he calls the liturgical reform a banal on-the-spot fabrication. Garbage. They made up a liturgy as a manufacturing process. But people say, well, the Pope has the power. He's got the authority to do whatever the liturgy. So he's got the full power to do that. So this is the section. But I will kind of look up on the website here, and I think I'm going to add a couple of things off of it, because again, it talks about the powers of the Pope, which now Cardinal Ratzinger wrote this praising Claus Gamber as a true liturgist, as a seer, as a prophet, and he wrote it in his capacity because he was at the time the head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith under Pope John Paul II, has authority. So let's read just the terms, because I'm not going to go through the whole thing. So people say, like certain Catholic YouTubers, say, well, you know, it's a discipline. The traditional Roman rite is a discipline, and the Pope has power over the discipline. So the Pope can change the rite of the Church. It's a discipline. What can you do about it? Let's see what the truth here, the true okay. Does the radical reform follow the tradition of the Church? The argument could be made. I'm just doing it here so you can see it with me instead of me reading it off the book. The argument could be made that the Pope's authority to introduce a new liturgical rite, that is, to do so without the decision of the Vatican, can be derived from the full and highest power, plena et suprema potestas, he has in the Church, as cited by the First Vatican Council. That pertain to the discipline and rule of the Church, that pertain to the discipline and rule spread throughout the world, Denziger, 1831. However, they can make that argument. However, the term disciplina, discipline, in no way applies to the liturgical rite of the Mass or any of the sacraments. Remember the profession of faith, the received and approved rites customarily used in the sacraments. We have to hold and embrace. Particularly in light of the fact that the popes have repeatedly observed that the rite is founded on apostolic tradition. So it's not upon the Pope's ideas. For this reason alone, the rite cannot fall into the category of discipline and rule of the Church. So when people say, oh, the Pope has the universal jurisdiction and he has the power over the discipline of and rule of the Church, no. The firm disciplina does not fall, in no way applies to the liturgical rite, and for this reason the rite cannot fall into the category of discipline and rule of the Church. To this we can add that there is not a single, not even one, not a single document, including the Codex Juris Canonici, the Code of Canon Law, in which there is a specific statement that the Pope, in his function as the supreme pastor of the Church, has the authority to abolish the traditional liturgical rite. He has no such, not even one statement saying that. In fact, however, nowhere is it mentioned that the Pope has the authority to change even a single local liturgical tradition. Actually, in the book, he says as well that Pope Gregory the Great changed something in Rome, and most churches refused to accept his change. And it took centuries for his alteration to spread, to be accepted. So he does not even have the fact. In fact, nowhere is it mentioned that the Pope has the authority to change even a single local liturgical tradition, let alone the universal rite. The fact that there is no mention of such authority strengthens our case considerably. There are clearly defined limits to the plena et suprema potestas, full and highest powers of the Pope. As, again, Benedict says, the Pope is not an absolute monarch whose will is law. For example, there is no question that even in matters of dogma, he still has to follow the tradition of the universal Church. That is, as Vincent of Lerins says, what has been believed, quod semper, quod ubique, quod ab omnibus. What has been believed always, everywhere, and by all. In fact, this is the important part which I've mentioned previously. In fact, there are several authors who state quite explicitly that it is clearly outside the Pope's authority to abolish the traditional rite. Thus, the eminent theologian Suarez, who died in 16 17. So after Trent, after Pius V. So it does not contradict what has been previously taught. This is the Tridentine understanding, the constant teaching of the Church, actually, in fact. Citing even earlier authors such as Cajetan, who died in 1534, took the position, and I'm going to give you a quote of Torquemada as well, anyways, who took the position that the Pope would be schismatic if he, as is his duty, would not be in full communion with the body of the Church, as, for example, if he were to excommunicate the entire Church, or if he were to change all the liturgical rites of the Church that have been upheld by apostolic tradition. A Pope would become schismatic. And I wanted to mention that I did actually, again, a video on it. Pope St. Victor and the Eastern bishops, Pope St. Victor in the year 150, 160, 170, wanted to force the bishops of Asia Minor to follow the Roman date for Easter. But they said, no, we're following the custom we received. He threatened them with excommunication and so forth. St. Irenaeus and others said, no, calm down, Victor. I mean, they didn't do anything wrong. And they refused. They said, well, we did not, from that early age, from the 180s, 190s, they wrote back to Pope St. Victor saying, we have not innovated in anything. We have kept the tradition we have received from St. John. So we are bound to hold on to the tradition we have received. And we have to say, like one of your predecessors said, sometimes we have to obey God rather than men. So we can see that even from that earliest age, the Pope did not, as it's clear here, he couldn't even force them to not change the liturgical rite. Even the date for Easter, they refused. It was only in the 4th, 5th centuries that finally the single unified date for Easter was reached. Okay. As we examine the issue of unlimited papal authority and how it relates to the authority to change the established liturgical rite, if the statement made by Suarez, Cajetan, Torquemada, which we're going to see, and as well actually by the Creed of Trent, the Creed of Vatican I, and the Anathema of the Council of Trent, which we have cited at the beginning, which I have cited at the beginning, as we examine the issue of unlimited papal authority and how it relates to the authority to change the established liturgical rite, if the statement made by Suarez still is not entirely convincing, this argument just may be. The already established fact that until Pope Paul VI, there has not been a single pope in 2,000 years who introduced the type of fundamental changes in liturgical forms which we now witness. So this is Monsignor Claus Gamber from his book, The Reform of the Roman Liturgy. And I think I have something here highlighted. For some reason I have the little note thingy. Let's see, what did I put here? Term disciplina. There are, so basically what we have just read actually, beyond the quote they say about Pope Paul VI, that fundamental which has never introduced until, like what we just said about the actually until Paul VI, there has not been a single pope who introduced the type of fundamental changes in the liturgical forms which we are now witnessing. In fact, we must note that even small changes to the liturgy introduced by a pope have never been readily accepted. Then he gives the Pope Gregory the Great, who died in 604, decided to follow the Byzantine rite in moving the rite of breaking of bread from the end of the canon Missae, to the beginning, of the rite, communion, and introduced the minor change only in the city of Rome, The changes was sharply criticized. In a letter to the Bishop of Syracuse, the Pope was forced into the position of having to defend it and some other minor liturgical changes he had also made, only for the city of Rome. In many locations, Gregory's reforms were not fully accepted until the 8th century. So, and anyways, so the other quote I wanted to say, he said, while he was talking about this section here, he says, thus Pope Innocent I in year 402 to 417 supports his demand for he says, in a letter, he dealt primarily with the liturgical issue by saying, he quotes the Latin, so the English is, who would not know or acknowledge that what has been handed down to the Roman Church by Peter, the Prince of the Apostles, and is kept even now, ought to be preserved by all, and nothing that lacks authority or sense or take its example from other sources. And then he quotes Pope Vigilius in 538 in a letter to the Metropolitan of Braga, and the English translation is here, wherefore we also have arranged the aforementioned text of the canonical prayer, which through the kindness of God we have received from the apostolic tradition. So all the liturgies have been received. They have not been invented by committee, by authors, by commissions. No. And we just quoted what Suarez has, and he has the Latin version of what Suarez says. So yeah, that's from the Book of the Roman Liturgy. Now, before we finish up with Pope Paul VI, I have from back in the day, the days of Ferdinand Brunner, the old Fatima Crusader. I still have it from there, still as good as new, from 1989. 1989. And there was an article, Let Catholics Have the Traditional Mass by Father Paul Kramer. And in it, it's a good article. And he actually quotes about the Pope becoming a schismatic. So Cajetan, Suarez, which we saw here. And let's see if I need my glasses for this one or not. Number 20. Okay. Okay, here. Let's see if I can read it clearly. Okay. Besides the canon, it should also be, this is from a footnote 20, also be noted that it is the teaching of both Suarez, which Cardinal Monsieur Claus Gamber quoted, and Cardinal Torquemada, that by the attempt to suppress the traditional liturgy of the Church, one falls into schism. Cardinal Juan de Torquemada, OP, Order of Preachers, from 1388 to 1468. In two of his posthumously published documents, Commentori in Decretum Gratiani and Summa de Ecclesia, and he quotes him saying, so he quotes Torquemada saying, in this way, the Pope could without doubt, fall into schism. Especially is this true when with regard to the divine liturgy. As for example, if he did not wish personally to follow the universal customs of and rites of the Church. So even if he personally didn't want to follow the customs and rites of the Church. This is the this this thus it is that Innocent states in the Constitutione that it is necessary to obey the Pope in all things, as long as he does not himself go against the universal customs of the Church. But should he go against the universal customs of the Church, he need not be followed. And then he quotes Francisco Suarez, which was quoted there, called by Paul V, Doctor Eximus et Pius, excellent and pious doctor, usually considered the greatest theologian of the Society of Jesus. He says, a pope falls into schism if he departs himself from the body of the Church by refusing to be in communion with her. The pope can become a schismatic in this manner, and if he does not wish to be. Let me put my glasses on. This is getting kind of. If he does not wish to be in proper communion with the body of the Church, a situation in which would arise if he tried to excommunicate the entire Church, or as both Cajetan and Torquemada observe, he wished to change all the ecclesiastical ceremonies founded as they are in apostolic tradition. So here you go. Here you go. That's from back in the day. Thank you, Father Kramer. So a pope. So what do we do if Pope Francis decides to ban the old Mass? You ignore it. He has no authority. He himself becomes a schismatic if he's not already fallen from the. If he's, assuming he's even Pope, you know. Anyways, so let's finish up here now with boom, 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 to show you that the Novus Ordo, the liturgy you go to every day, every Sunday, is not the Roman Rite. It's a fabrication. It's different. It's not the same. And as such, it is not traditional. And as such, it is not Catholic. Pope Paul VI, that is from November 19th, 1969, addressed to a general audience. So I'm not going to read it. I'm just going to quote, because I have my first video on it years ago. I have it. I read the whole thing. I might do it again, but anyways, here it is. So he basically, what does he call? He calls it the liturgy of the new rite, arising from this. So he talks about others' questions arising. Answer will be given to these questions and others like them arising from this innovation. So it's a new rite, and it is this innovation and the Mass of the new rite. And it is celebrated in the new rite as they were in the old. So he makes a distinction between the new rite and the old, which is the Catholic rite and the new rite. In the new rite, what will be the result of this innovation? That's Paul VI, November 19th, 1969. Let's go to the final one, changes in the... So they did changes in the Mass for a greater apostolate, and of course, Grillo, if you're paying attention, it destroyed the apostolate. Clear cause and effect. Okay? That's from November 26, 1969. So, what does he call it? The liturgical innovation of the new rite of the Mass. It is not the Roman Rite, people. The liturgical innovation of the new rite of the Mass. Number 2, a new rite, not the Roman Rite, a new rite of the Mass and of all the 7 sacraments later on. A change in the venerable tradition that has gone on for centuries. This is something that affects our hereditary religious patrimony, which seems to enjoy the privilege of being untouchable and settled. And this ancient custom is, it seems to bring the prayers of our forefathers and our saints to our lips, but this has been abolished and removed, and give us the comfort of feeling faithful to our spiritual past, but this has been destroyed, which we kept alive to pass it on to generations ahead, but we haven't. Now we have destroyed it. Number 4, we must prepare psychologically for this many-sided inconvenience. It is the kind of upset, his novelty, his new rite, this upset caused by every novelty that breaks with our habits. We shall notice that the pious, so the faithful, the real true believers, persons are disturbed most by his new rite, by his novelty, by his innovation. Even priests may feel some annoyance in this respect. This novelty is no small thing. So for those online or in publications say, this is not a big deal. It was just a revision of the Roman Rite. It was just, some modifications. It's a translation of the liturgy. It's not. If it was simply a translation, an accurate translation of the traditional Roman Rite, I would still want to maintain the Latin and bring it back, but I would not have much of a problem. It was at least maintaining the rite, maintaining the prayer, maintaining the tradition. But this is a completely different rite. He said, Paul VI, the Pope of the new Mass, the rite of Paul VI, he says, this novelty is no small thing. It's no small thing. Is no small thing. The nature, or even, we should not let ourselves be surprised by the nature or even the nuisance of its exterior forms. So this is his praise of his new rite. The nature and the nuisance of its exterior forms. And as intelligent persons and conscientious faithful, we should find out as much as we can about this innovation. Number 9, we have reason indeed to regret, reason almost for bewilderment about the loss of Latin, loss of Gregorian chant, loss of the ancient prayers of the Church. This is Paul VI speaking. How can we celebrate this new rite? Priests but then he makes a distinction again between the Roman Rite and the new rite. Priests who celebrate in Latin in private or also in public in cases provided by legislation may use either the Roman Missal or the new rite. So the Roman Missal, so the new rite is not the Roman Missal because it's the Roman Missal or the new rite. So this is Paul VI lamenting, calling about the bewilderment, regret, the nuisance of its forms, the innovation, the novelty, the disturbance it will cause, this inconvenience, this liturgical innovation. This is the new, it's not a small thing. This which has destroyed our hereditary religious patrimony, our unsettled and then the prayers of our fathers which came to our lips. This is Paul VI talking about the new rite. So, what can I say? This is what has happened. This is what they want to promote, and I think very clearly now shown that the new rite is not the Roman rite. It is illegal. It is impossible. There is no peace between tradition and novelty, between the true Roman rite and the innovations. Tradition is not change. Tradition is not constant change. It is passing on what has been received. And as I showed you, the Council of Trent's decree, I'm going to close it up with this. If anyone shall say that they accepted and approved, they received the receptos et approbatos, the received and approved rites of the Catholic Church, which are customary, traditionally used in the administration of the solemn sacraments may either be despised or omitted without sin by the minister at will, or changed into new ones by anyone whomsoever, by anyone whatsoever, let him be anathema. And in the creed, our faith, the creed of the Catholic Church, the creed of profession of faith of Trent, the profession of faith of Vatican I, profession of faith of the Catholic Church, one of the four creeds of the Catholic Church, declares, even the Pope himself declares, Pius himself declares as part of the faith, that we must accept and embrace apostolic and ecclesiastical traditions, observances, and constitutions of the Church, and we have to receive and accept the rites of the Catholic Church, which have been received, the approved customary rites, and approved in the solemn administration of all the sacraments. Because this is the true Catholic faith, outside of which no one can be saved. Not even Grillo or Francis of Rome. Francis Jorge of Argentina. That's it. That's all. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and found it enlightening. And hopefully I have successfully demolished Grillo, Francis, and the rest of their cohorts, promoters of evil. Before I close, what do we do if the Pope bans the Mass? I hope priests just simply ignore it. Ignore the decree. Bishops ignore the decree. He does not have the power. He has no power over the liturgy in this sense, to ban the ancient liturgy. Just go to it anyways. Find priests who will celebrate it. Worst case scenario, go to traditional orders. Find a way. Or worst case, you can't find it anywhere, then go to the Byzantine rites, the Catholic rites of the Eastern rites of the Catholic Church, until they come after them and try to destroy them all. Anyways, that's it. That's all. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe to the channel, give a thumbs up, comment on the video. Let's push the truth out. Let's bring it to light. Let's not just be sheep ready to be slaughtered and say, well, we obey the Pope. Maybe we don't deserve the traditional Mass. It's our fault. No, these are demon-possessed heretics who want to destroy you, who want to destroy the faith, who spit on Christ, whom Francis himself honored, the artist who peed in a jar and submerged the crucifix of Christ and called it art. Francis gave him the thumbs up and greeted him. This happened. This is not love of God. This is hatred of God. And to love God, we have to stand to the truth and hold on to it, no matter who tells us, you're wrong, you're being schismatic. No, the Pope would become a schismatic. Francis would become a schismatic. Grillo is a schismatic, not us. Okay, that's it. That's all. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.